Welcome to the King of the Court podcast with Ben Riggs and Ben Staten.
All right, welcome to the King of the Court podcast with Ben Riggs and Ben Staten. And I'm Ben Riggs. This is Ben Staten.
Yo.
We're excited to be here. I feel like we're in full swing of the NBA season. Some of these games are still pretty choppy, still pretty messy. It's still fun, competitive basketball. And, like that Nuggets Timberwolves game the other night, that almost felt like it had playoff intensity. It was fun to watch. And it's good to be able to, at the end of the day, sit down on the couch and catch some really good basketball games. Enjoyed that one. We'll talk a little bit about that one in a minute. But let's go ahead and kick off the show with our quick takes. And our quick take segment is really where we just sort of tackle 4 or 5 quick topics right off the top that we think are really interesting, exciting about the league. And I know that you've had your eye on Cleveland, and I think everybody has. I think they've been one of, if not the biggest surprises in the NBA this season.
No, man, they're 7-0. And this is not a situation where it's a situation, where they look worse on the court than they do in their record-wise. They're really, their offense is flowing. The Mobley and Allen pairing is really, really working. I've seen some real improvement, especially from Jared Allen, honestly. Down low in the post, he seems to have gotten stronger. And the biggest thing to me was their game against the Lakers. In the past, one of the things you've seen is even though they've had 2 really, really high-level defensive bigs, they've both been kind of skinny, and that you could shove them around. And AD, historically, has been a big who has excelled or thrived in situations where he has a strength advantage. He's one of the best players in the league when he has a strength advantage. He tends to just overpower bigs on the glass. He gets to his positions. He gets anything he wants. And they did a really good job defensively on that game. Allen seems to have gotten stronger, but not lost any of the quickness and athleticism that has made him the player he is right now. Mobley still isn't shooting volume threes, but he's over 40% on the year. So on 2 threes a game, so don't want to get too excited about that. But I think Bickerstaff, their new coach, has got the offense working in a more egalitarian way. This isn't just the Donovan Mitchell show. You got the ball moving around a lot more. You have Garland more involved. I'm really excited about where this can go, and I think that there's a real case to be made that they're the second best team in the East.
Oh, I think there's a strong case for them to be made that they're the second best team in the East. That Lakers-Cleveland game, one of the things that immediately stood out to me about it was what they did really well against AD. AD was 53% shooting in that game with 22 points and 13 rebounds. Like he had a good game. What they did particularly well against him was prevented him from being able to get in a shot, forcing the ball out of his hands.
Yes.
And I think like particularly with that sort of twin tower approach, they're able to do that. I don't think either one of those guys can stand up against an AD, an Embiid, or a Jokic by themselves. But with the configuration of that team, they don't have to. And as long as they're sharp on their rotations and they close out quickly, they're able to do that. And I think one of the biggest things you see about their defense that's a big difference this year from last year is they communicate really well. They communicate really well, and they're very, 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 very sharp on those rotations. The other thing that stood out to me was, and I think this is pretty typical about the Lakers, when the offense has problems running through AD, whatever the defense is doing to compensate and sort of create that blockage, it opens things up for LeBron, and he's able to get to the rim and finish a little easier. And he had a good game that game. He was, he shot like 65, 70% from the floor that night, had 26 points, but no one else on that team was capable of getting into the paint and finishing near the rim. That twin tower presence in the middle of the floor really, 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 and they move very well, unlike what you saw in Minnesota last year. Rudy doesn't move that well. Jared Allen and Evan Mobley are quick. They move well. I agree with you. I think that this team, I'm still bullish on the Knicks. And to be quite honest with you, I think watching Karl Anthony Towns over the past week or so, I'm getting a little bit more bullish on them. After that first game against the Celtics, I don't think Mikal Bridges could have been going anywhere but up. And so, I'm still bullish on the Knicks. I think they're going to be up there. I still have them over Cleveland, but no doubt Cleveland's coming on strong. I mentioned this game earlier, and this is my first quick take. That Timberwolves Nuggets game was super exciting. It felt like it had the intensity of playoff basketball. It was great. I loved it. Like, it was very clear that Minnesota came in that game fired up and ready to go. But I felt like the Nuggets also came into that game with last year's playoffs on their mind. And that dunk from Christian Braun, man. Rudy was shook to his core by that one. You could tell. But this quick take isn't about that game. It's not about the Nuggets either. It's about the Timberwolves, particularly as it pertains to Anthony Edwards. There's been a lot of talk about the uptick in three-point shooting from Anthony Edwards. He's currently averaging 12 three-pointers a game. He's taken 74 on the year. It's important to note he is shooting 43% from three. And so the big caveat for me is like, if we get to the end of the season and Anthony Edwards is still shooting plus 40% from three on the year, then this uptick in three-pointers is a net positive for the Timberwolves. That goes without saying. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, if you can shoot 43% on 13 three-pointers a game, no one's going to complain.
Yeah. Well, people are complaining, but I don't see how. It doesn't make any sense, right? Like, if you're shooting 43% from three on high-volume three-point shots, these are good shots. I have serious doubts about Anthony Edwards' ability to increase his three-point percentage by 8% in a single offseason. That seems highly unlikely to me, and I think we're going to see some reverting to the mean pretty soon. I'm assuming you would agree with that as well.
Oh, 100%. I mean, I don't think I've ever seen a situation at this high a volume of a player nearly, increasing his three-point percentage by double digits. Especially not a first option scorer where the entire defense is primarily focused on you. Yeah. That's a completely different situation than, like, say, Jalen Williams last year, who I think for the season shot over what he will shoot this year. But Anthony Edwards is the guy. I mean, he's one of the primary guys in the league. So I think you're going to see some regression in that three-point percentage. And then when 57% of your total shot diet is from three, and then it starts to fall down to the 35, 36, 37% range, then I think we got a real problem. Anthony Edwards is currently averaging 11 drives per game, just 3.5 shots within 5 feet of the basket. For somebody with his skill set, that's wholly unacceptable to me. Like once again, like, you got the asterisk next to it that he's shooting really well from three right now. This is just such a small sample size. It's really hard to imagine that that's going to carry forward. And when it doesn't carry forward in my hypothetical situation, then him just taking 3.5 shots per game in or around the rim is a huge problem, especially when you're talking about that being literally half of what he was getting last year. And so you start looking at the explanation. Like, why is this happening? And I think there is the most likely explanation for it, which is that the presence of Julius Randle it's a very different presence than Karl Anthony Towns. Karl Anthony Towns works quickly. He stands out on the perimeter. He catches the ball. He's either open and shoots it, has a smaller defender on him, shoots over him, or he puts his head down and attacks the rim very quickly. Julius Randle eats clock. He holds the ball for a long time, takes a while to get into his shot. And even once he starts operating, he's operating in the space that Anthony Edwards wants to occupy. Yes.
And I think that that's going to compromise the spacing on the floor for the Minnesota Timberwolves. And given the lack of offensive production that Minnesota has, I mean, because right now, Minnesota's, I think we would all agree, Minnesota's performing well below expectations up until this point.
Yeah. 100%.
And if they're doing that with Anthony Edwards shooting extremely well from three, I think that those expectations are going to continue to be disappointed as the season rolls on and that 3-point percentage drops. I'll kick it over to you with this one last note. It is possible that in Julius Randle, the Minnesota Timberwolves saw increased playmaking as an option over what they had with Cat. Because Randle is a better passer than Cat is. I don't think Randle is like an exceptional playmaker. But he averages about 5 assists per year, and he is capable of creating some shots for some other people. And so maybe they think that there's some play for Anthony Edwards off of Julius Randle that leads to more open looks, and maybe that's what they're working towards. I'm dubious of that. I'm just throwing it out there as sort of a devil's advocate argument. I do think it's the spacing. What are your thoughts about that?
It's the spacing. The ball's really sticky in Minnesota. Randle gets the ball, he gets it on the elbow, and he pauses and he surveys. He's always done this. Now he's good at this, but he surveys. He holds the ball. He stops the ball. Edwards, a lot of his offense right now is he rushes up the court, gets the ball, and immediately pulls up for three-pointer. And the reason he's doing that is that, they have two bigs who are clogging the lane, and the shooter on the side is McDaniels, who can make threes but isn't that great. And one of either Nickeil Alexander-Walker or DiVincenzo, who, DiVincenzo can space the floor a little bit, but one spacer is just not enough to, unclog an offense. And the bigger issue with the team is that this is a team that needs to play faster to order to generate easy points. They're not playing faster. Part of the reason is they don't actually have a point guard in most of their lineups. Or if they have a point guard, he's 37 years old and Mike Conley. So he's not running up the court, put it that way. And
100%.
So when you watch them play, they have to work and grind out every single point they score unless they're getting steals. And now that is, they are a team that needs to generate their points from their defense. And I'm not seeing that as much as I saw in last year's playoffs. Part of that is you see teams are a little more cognizant of the threat that their perimeter defenders face. And so they'll leave multiple players in the backcourt when they're bringing the ball up the court just in case someone gets trapped. The other part of it is people are a little more just aware of all this, and it's hard. It's hard at the NBA level to press opponents and get a lot of steals.
Yeah.
Just like these players are just too good.
Yeah.
But I have significant concerns about their offense long term. I do not see this. I see this as an offense that, in a playoff series especially, teams are going to be able to run gimmick defenses on and force them to bad shots. Edwards, he's shooting 43% from three. If this holds, then yes, you can shoot 13 threes. But right now, you have a guy who the NBA has been prepping as the next Michael Jordan, who's playing like Klay Thompson. And that is a really, 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 really weird dynamic. And it also means that when he's on the court, if Edwards is just pulling up from three, there is no one on their offense who is trying to initiate stuff. Now, Randle will pass, but Randle's not someone who's bringing the ball up the court. Randle needs the ball. He gets the ball on the elbow. He stops and surveys, like I said. So you have a lot of situations where their offense looks kind of AAU-like, in the sense that there's a guy who runs up the court, just takes a really weird wild jump shot, the ball goes a rebound, and they go back on defense. And I just don't see this working. I don't really see a solution. I mean, they can institute more offense, but if you listen to the coach, they want Edwards to shoot more of these 3-pointers.
Yeah.
And I think it's just bad for the league. If
you listen to Edwards, he wants to shoot more 3-pointers. Yeah. I mean, they asked him the question the other night, what do you say to people like you and me who were saying he's shooting too many 3-pointers? And his answer was, fuck him.
Yeah, that's exactly it. But this is the way that they're going to beat a team like OKC is by pounding it down in the post. And Edwards running up the court and just taking 3-point jump shots plays into their hands completely. They have
Let me
all
let me let
defensive
me ask
guards in
this.
the world for
Let
that.
me ask this question. And I know this is supposed to be a quick take, but Minnesota is just such a fascinating team. Maybe we unpack this a little bit more. You just said the way they beat a team like OKC is they pound it in the post. One other point that I would make about Minnesota is it's not just Anthony Edwards three. In fact, Anthony Edwards is not even the primary candidate on the team. I think you're going to see a depreciation in the 3-point percentage. It's Julius Randle. Julius Randle shooting 50% from three right now.
Yeah,
that's not going to that's not going to sustain at all. Like, you're going to see Julius Randle drop into the mid to low 30s as the season progresses from there. And what you're going to see teams do is slack off of him even more and which is going to compromise that spacing even more. So when you say, the way they beat a team like OKC, and I'm assuming you mean OKC without Hartenstein out there, because I don't see Rudy Gobert. Hey, look, I mean, I'm going to talk more about this in a minute, so I don't want to belabor the point about Hartenstein and Chet. But for all the shit I've given to the acquisition of Hartenstein, I think Hartenstein can be an adequate defensive presence against Rudy Gobert. I have a traffic cone that we use for basketball drills at my house that might be able to be an adequate defensive presence on Rudy Gobert. So who do you think's working in the post? Is it Julius Randle?
I think they need to, Randle's the first one. I think they need to play in and out through Randle to beat OKC. And I think that they actually match up pretty poorly against OKC without Cat. Cat was kind of a really important piece to
That's what I was going to ask you. Are we really talking about the Cat configuration of Minnesota when we say that?
Yeah, and the bigger issue I see with this situation is that one of the reasons that Edwards right now is able to just bomb away from three is that teams are still playing him like he has played his entire career, which is that he's a drive first player. So they're backing up off of him, and he's just pulling up and shooting 3-pointers. And
I agree 100%.
That there's going to be a course correction after about 15, 20 games if it's this. And now you can say, well, that point is just going to drive to the hoop. That's great. The problem with that is, as I said, the lane's clogged. And in a playoff series, like a team like OKC, which is really well coached, is going to pressure him 94 feet. They're going to pressure him. They're going to have a guy on him the entire time and say, you want to pull up from three, you're going to have a guy in your face. And they're going to have, this is where their stable of all defensive level guards really comes in handy because they can rotate him and they can just try to tire him out. And
which we know is something you can do because Kyrie did it to him last year.
Yeah. And so, you need to have a way. You need to have a way to get into your offense, get the ball moving, and generate easy points. And the only way I can see that against OKC is Randle being able to play bully ball down low, especially against a Chet, or using him as a high post player to get, because he's actually a very, very good passer in the high post, and using that to generate offense. But
let me ask this question to put a button on this topic. You said the only way I can see them generating enough offense to beat OKC is playing through Julius Randle in the high post. I don't disagree with what you're saying. The only caveat to that might be is if they can, put DiVincenzo out there with Anthony Edwards, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Jaden McDaniels, because they have a hell of a defensive backcourt rotation as well. And they can force a bad shooting night from OKC, and then OKC's offense becomes inefficient, which is some of what I think Dallas was able to do to OKC. If they're able to do that, and I think Julius Randle's the type of defender who, matched up with Chet on the perimeter, can stifle a lot of Chet's drives off the dribble. With all that said, if you told me today these two teams were playing a 7-game series, I would tell you that they're not. Minnesota does not have the ability to make it a 7-game series. I think OKC is going to play them off the floor pretty quickly.
You're also going to have a bunch of 80, 85, 95 to 85 games in that series because you're going to have a bunch of guys who are really good defensively guarding a bunch of guys who are really good defensively but limited offensively. because they kind of have like they both kind of have rosters full of those type of players. And then like they also just have also like they have that and then a bunch of 3-point gunners, like Isaiah Joe and DiVincenzo. So there is some similarities. Last year when they played, what you referenced there was one of the ways that they beat OKC was they bullied them. They got a lot, like, and they did this to a lot of teams. They got a lot of offensive rebounds. They junked up points on that end. They slowed the game down. One of the benefits of offensive rebounds that is not talked about enough is that you get to reset. Usually you get a relatively easy point in your defense. Allows your defense to get set up because it's really hard to fast break off of that. And they're not generating anywhere near the same amount of offensive rebounds this year. There's a lot more possessions which end with Rudy Gobert just sort of like trying to dunk on people, which leads to very funny results because he's not someone who dunks on people. And that some of this is going to get resolved because they're just learning how to play together. But right now they are not running an offense that is that is efficient enough or has enough firepower, in my opinion, to get out of the first round of the NBA playoffs. That's my thing. I think that they are a first round exit team right now if they don't make any changes.
Yeah, I don't disagree. All right, moving along. Tell me about the Memphis Grizzlies.
Man, they're one of the most fun teams in the league to me. They're all over the place. They traded like I think it was 2 first round picks and Tyus Jones for Marcus Smart, who's probably become a unplayable player, and this year bulked up to be a power forward in a point guard's body, and it's providing them nothing. But then offset that by getting 10 points a game from Jay Huff, Scottie Pippen Jr., and Jalen Wells, all of whom were on 2-way contracts at some point. And Scottie Pippen Jr. is arguably, in my opinion, the best backup point guard in the league. That's my hot take. He is a fantastic defensive guard, like his dad. He is a whirling dervish, tons of athleticism. His problem when he came out of college was that he never knew how to slow down. So he was always playing at 100. And he now has learned a little bit, like he's not driving to the hoop at 100% speed at all times. And he is, just look at his stats. He's having 11 points a game, 3 rebounds, 7.3 assists, and only 2.4 turnovers.
On 25 minutes.
And 25 minutes a game. Jay Huff, a guy who, he's basically a 3-point shooting center. He's been a revelation this year. He's averaging 11 points a game. He's shooting about almost 40%, over 40%. He's shooting 55.6% from 3.
He is everything that Denver was looking for when they signed Dario Saric and just let Jay Huff walk out the building.
Yeah. And he's better. He is a better player than Dario Saric right now. You got Jalen Wells, who's drafted this year, who's been a great sort of 3-and-D wing. And then you got the players who haven't even played this year. You got Vince Williams Jr., who last year I thought was sneakily one of the best developmental 3-and-D wings. He gave me shades of a Danny Green, who's not as good a shooter but could dribble. Which is kind of an important skill as well. And they got Gigi Jackson, and another Santi Aldama. He's a first round pick from a couple of years ago, so it's not so
sure.
But he's averaging.
But he's playing well.
He's playing really, really well. About 13 points a game, 8 rebounds a game, 3 assists. They're getting great production from places they did not expect, and it's not production. Look, do I think that Jay Huff is going to shoot 55% from 3? No, but
you're a hater.
Yeah, clearly. But I think he's definitely a 45% shooter.
You don't need him. Like anything you're getting from Jay Huff like that, like anybody, you go back to the offseason and you make any kind of argument like that for Jay Huff, and everybody's going to think you're huffing something.
Yes. No. I remember the dude wasn't a real NBA. Like he wasn't even an NBA player, to be real. Like he was being, cut, waived here and there. Like this is a miraculous thing for his career, and all the props to him because I believe he's 27. He's totaled in the league now for like 3-4 years, going between the G League and the NBA. It's a fantastic story. But they have a nucleus for a really exciting team. Jaren Jackson Jr., Morant, Bane, as sort of the core three. I thought at the beginning of the year that Smart was going to play a major role. I think Smart could be out of the rotation completely by the end of the year. He looks really, really bad. People aren't talking about it, but he's borderline unplayable. He's lost all of his speed, and he's still got his sort of defensive know-how, but he can't shoot. He still can't shoot, can't really pass anymore either. But they have the pieces for not only to be competitive this year. I don't think that they're I don't think they're a title contender really this year. But I think that if these pieces grow and they continue to develop, we're talking about a team in 2-3 years that could really, really, really be up there because they not only have these young players, they have them locked down on these really, really good sort of like 4-year minimum contracts, which is going to allow them to like trade them around and package and upgrade on the roster. So I'm really excited about them. Now this could all go really. Talk about players that came out of the blue, so it could all, it could go back in the blue.
Last podcast, I brought up Jay Huff, in reference to decisions that the Denver front office had made, and I said, in a few weeks we could be back on here, and I'd be like, "Hey, you remember that time I mentioned Jay Huff?" They just waived him. So. I mean, that all that's entirely plausible. I do agree with you about Scottie Pippen Jr. I don't think anybody thought he was going to be as impactful as he has been.
Lakers last year, Lakers would kill to have him right now. He would kill to have him. Yeah,
he might start.
Yeah,
that's the thing. Is like he would fit so much better.
Yeah.
In what they're trying to do than D'Angelo Russell does. Another player I'll throw in that category too. Spencer Dinwiddie. After Spencer Dinwiddie left Dallas and had his tour in Brooklyn and then in LA, I kind of thought you'd seen the last of an impactful Spencer Dinwiddie.
Yeah.
And he's playing really well for Dallas. He's doing exactly what the Lakers need a point guard to do. Playing defense, playmaking, all that. Now, I don't know that he could do it as a starter, but on a team like the Lakers where they desperately need shooting, he's not an elite shooter, but he's a better shooter than a lot of people they got on the floor. And he isn't a revolving door on defense, which would be important. But back to the Grizzlies. I'm not going to add much to that. I will say one of the things that's kind of piqued my interest about what's going on in Memphis is the uptick in assists for Ja Morant. Because for a player as skillful as Ja Morant, particularly as athletic and fast as Ja Morant, like somebody that explosive, being able to become an elite playmaker. You see this in Luka Doncic. One of the reasons Luka is able to score at will is because teams are so terrified of his playmaking ability. They're constantly on guard for where the ball is going, and it just makes it easier for him to score himself. And I think that if you're about to see that evolution in Ja Morant's game, you really could see him take it to a whole nother level because he is as athletic as anyone in the league.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah, and so I think, and he's also the type of player, like when you talk about face of the league and, just some of the most talented players in the league, like he's at the top of the list. And so a player like that takes his game to another level, and he has a supporting cast around him like Desmond Bane and Jaren Jackson Jr. I don't disagree with you. I don't think they're going anywhere special this year. But that's a team that if they can hold it together and continue, like avoid what appeared to be some sort of curse last year, avoid relapsing into that and just some of the off the court issues and just keep that team playing basketball, building chemistry, putting wins together, I think they really, really, really could be a serious problem in the Western Conference in short order. So speaking of who is and who isn't a problem in the Western Conference, what do you think of this thing going on out in Golden State? I mean, I don't, other than Steph Curry and Draymond Green, I don't know who the starters are. Like, the rotations are wild. I don't think that this is something that can continue to produce the results that it's producing over any long period of time. But, there's been quite a few games where I've watched them and thought like, oh, they're not going to be able to win this one, and they pull it off. So what do you think?
Well, I think that everyone's missing the forest for the trees here. This is actually just an attempt by Steve Kerr to troll Jason Tatum after saying in the Olympics that there was no way to play a 10-man rotation. In the Olympics, he comes out and plays a 13-man rotation with the Golden State Warriors. And has no problem finding minutes for Gary Payton II at the bottom of the roster. But no, what they are doing,
Lindy Waters, the fourth,
legitimately getting, and not junk minutes too.
No, deciding games,
and getting the bulk of his minutes in the fourth quarter. But they remind me of the Hubie Brown Grizzlies from, I believe, 2003, when he hadn't coached in the NBA for like 20 years. He came back out there and he had 10 really, really good players. So he ran out he made the novel decision of like, screw it, we're just going to literally sub out all 5 players at once every time and get that. And so they're running hockey shifts. They're running hockey shifts, 2 hockey shifts, and then they have 2 sort of like roamers who come in and interchange on both shifts. They play typically 12, a 12-man rotation, and it's a legitimate 12-man rotation. These 12 players are all getting 15 or more minutes a game. And the thing that's working right now is these players are busting their ass. I mean, all you got to do is you just look at the stats. Looney's averaging 16 minutes a game. He's averaging 5.7 points and 7.8 rebounds in 16.2 minutes a game. You extrapolate that, that's 18 rebounds a game in 36 minutes.
He's created such a competitive environment for minutes that it truly is a meritocracy where like players are fighting, not in a negative way. They're competing in a positive way to see who can be impactful on the court and accumulate more minutes.
Yeah, Buddy Hield is playing 25 minutes a game. He's honestly been the best player on the team, just point blank, in some of these games.
Unquestionably. I mean, as far as perimeter shooting goes in the league, he's the best 3-point shooter in the NBA right now.
Yeah, he's in 25 minutes. He's getting up 10 3-pointers a game and shooting 51% from them. It's just amazing. Wiggins
and these are not just catch and shoot threes either. A lot of these are high difficulty level shots.
Oh no, he is going to end up being the real addition from the offseason. It's just going to look like a stroke of genius because he was always a player who was destined to play in that sort of system.
Oh, I agree with you completely. There are 2 players in the NBA that I think if you look at them and you say no one expected them to have this level of impact, and they are truly, truly, truly playing at a very high level. Like if you were to give it to the most surprising player of the year award through 2 weeks, it's Buddy Hield and Norman Powell.
Yep, I would agree on that. And the big thing also when you look at them, they do look like they're having a lot of fun. These are a lot of players who you can see sort of. If you ever played basketball in a meritocracy style team, you can see players having a lot of fun, especially because they feel like they're getting what they deserve, and they feel like they don't feel worried they're not going to get their minutes, they're going to get yanked. They don't feel like they've been pigeonholed into a role. So it's a really fun team to watch. Now, there's a couple of things that I sort of want to throw some cold water on that. One, Curry hasn't looked that great so far. It's really early days, but he's averaging 18 points a game. He's still shooting at a high level, but that's kind of a warning sign. 2, Draymond is showing some real signs of sort of dropping off. Now he's shooting 46.7% from 3, which seems like probably not like it's going to be sustainable, especially given he's shooting 60% from the free throw line. But the dude cannot jump anymore. He is he's still a really good defender because he can move laterally really well, but he literally has no vertical jumping ability anymore.
You see what he said after guarding Zion two games in a row?
What did he say?
He said Zion is not strong; he is powerful.
Oh, yes.
I woke up the next morning and I was just hurting. I'm in pain. I think that, and I bring that up to say that what Golden State asks from Draymond is to guard the Zions. He's going to have to deal with that against LA with LeBron and AD. He's going to have to deal with that with Sacramento with Sabonis. Like, Draymond's going to take a lot of wear and tear. And, one of the arguments against the meritocracy 12-man rotation, basically people are saying no one's going to, as the season progresses, these guys are going to want to get their minutes and they're going to get tired of this. And they're going to start demanding what they think they deserve. Well, the interesting thing about Golden State is there's really only two guys on that team who have that type of claim: Steph Curry and Draymond Green. Everybody else is truly in a position where they're fighting for those minutes. Now, you could argue Kuminga's not like that.
His ass, though, yeah.
Yeah, but I was about to say, Kerr clearly will Tatum his ass in a heartbeat, and doesn't have any problem doing it. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised, given the nature of Jonathan Kuminga and Steve Kerr's relationship in the past, where that they've even been willing to hash some of this out publicly. I wouldn't be surprised if there was a conversation with Steve Kerr bitched Jonathan Kuminga where Jonathan Kuminga expressed his discomfort or displeasure with it. And Steve Kerr said, "Did you see what I did to damn Jason Tatum in the Olympics? You don't think I'll do that to Jonathan Kuminga?" Going back to the argument against the rotations, I don't buy that. And the reason I don't buy it is because there's only two guys on that team with that type of claim. And I don't think Steph Curry's minutes are in any doubt. Steph Curry will play every minute he wants to or it is needed to. I do not believe, Steve Kerr will Tatum Steph Curry. Let me put it that way. And so Steph Curry is going to get his minutes because of how physically taxing the Western Conference is going to be on Draymond. I don't think you're going to hear those kind of complaints from Draymond. I think Draymond's going to be happy to see some of those minutes reduced. I think he's going to need it. My argument against the rotations is simply this. Outside of Buddy Hield, I think you have a lot of people who are thrilled to damn death to be on an NBA court playing meaningful minutes for a relevant basketball team. And they're super excited about it and they're punching above their weight. And I think as we go into the season, you're going to see some of this level out some. And these guys, Steve Kerr doesn't just have a roster full of people who are, low-key NBA starters that nobody else was aware of. I think Lindy Waters is not going to be sixth man of the year this year. And you're going to see a lot of this stuff sort of revert back to the status quo. And you're going to start getting a lot less punch out of this team. That's my thoughts about the 12-man rotation. And what's going to happen is the meritocracy, and I suspect this is what Steve Kerr is working towards. The point of the meritocracy is not to play an 82-game season this way. The point of the meritocracy is to have a Hunger Games to figure out who my guys are.
Yeah, I mean, there's logical explanations why this is a smart thing to do. The Spurs won an NBA title in 2014 running a 10-man rotation, basically. And part of the reason it was helpful was all their dudes were 35-year-old or older. And so you needed to have this level of depth to be able to just rest them. And I mean, and if you have the right players and you stagger the rotations correctly, you can end up with a NBA team that wins the finals with Thiago Splitter playing 25 minutes a game. And I love Thiago Splitter, but that's a really rough thing to do.
He's Thiago Splitter.
Thiago Splitter. I mean, the Spurs were putting up Boris Diaw and Thiago Splitter against LeBron and and Chris Bosh, and still managing to win those minutes sometimes. So you really have to ace the rotations. The other thing it does is it really requires your team to have incredible chemistry, which the Warriors do have to some extent. But as we've seen these past couple of years, there are some figures on the Warriors that have a tendency to, let's say, rock the boat or more aptly punch it. And there's also sort of a history of this team descending into drama, which poisons that. The final thing I'll point out, and this is one of the more important ones, they are 5-1, but so far they have played Portland, Utah, the Clippers, New Orleans twice, and Houston. This is not a murderer's row. In fact, those are all games, especially considering they played New Orleans when New Orleans has been sort of dealing with injuries. These are all games where you could reasonably expect them to win. And so I don't, look, they're 5-1. They're about as good as they could get in the situation. But let's see how they do next week when they play Boston and Cleveland and Oklahoma City. They play Boston, Cleveland, Oklahoma City, Dallas, Memphis in a row, from now November 15th. There's a very decent chance that they lose all those games, and that the conversation we have about them is, this is a 500 play-in level team, which it may be. But it's been a lot of fun to watch. One of the things that I really appreciate about them is that the NBA in recent years has gone towards homogeneity in the sense that all teams start playing alike and start running the same sets and start running the same types of rotations. This team stands out when you watch it. They are different, and I do appreciate that because I think that the NBA is at most fun when you have different styles and contrasting styles and playing. And I love to see teams that are embracing that.
Yeah, I think this is the Steve Kerr year where it's about him coaching his ass off, and we'll see how well this actually works.
Yep.
All right, our last quick take, none of which have been quick thus far, is Chet Holmgren. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because I don't really want to belabor the point, and I don't want to come off as a hater because I am not hating on Chet Holmgren. I think that Chet Holmgren has had a fantastic season. I actually think one of the interesting developments about the Oklahoma City Thunder thus far is that there was a lot of talk going into the season about this is the year we're going to see the breakout year from Jalen Williams, where he suddenly becomes an all-NBA level player. Brian Windhorst was pushing that narrative pretty hard. I don't think that we're seeing that.
We're still waiting to see that.
Yeah. I've not seen it. I think that what we've really seen is Chet Holmgren emerge as the second option for the OKC Thunder. Absolutely. And one of the things I want to point out about the Oklahoma City Thunder is currently, because Hartenstein is hurt and they don't have another legitimate center on the team, Chet Holmgren's basically playing the 5. I think that he did fairly well against Nikola Jokic. I actually think his ability to draw Nikola Jokic out of the middle and force Nikola Jokic to kind of guard him a little bit more on the perimeter is to Chet's advantage. Chet's quicker than Jokic is. He is one of the centers that Chet can take off the dribble. But in the last 2 games, you've seen Chet match up against more fleet-footed centers in DeAndre Ayton and Zubac. And particularly with the Clippers, because basically the Clippers are Zubac, Harden, and then a bunch of 3-and-D guys. Norman Powell sort of emerging as I think Norman Powell took Jalen Williams all-NBA season hopes away from him, and he's using him for himself. But, you saw Chet Holmgren struggle more in those 2 games, shooting 33% from the floor. So Chet on the season is actually struggling mightily from 3. He's shooting 29% from 3 this year. And and he was shooting 37% from last year. But one of the interesting things about the zone in which Chet shoots from three, Chet from sort of, beyond the break, up at the top, he shoots the three from the top of the key very well. And doesn't really shoot it that well from anywhere else on the floor when you look at his numbers from last year. I think teams are a little more keyed in on Chet getting the ball up at the top and not letting him walk into threes and have open looks this year, and forcing more of his threes to come from around the horn. And I think that's diminished his 3-point percentage some. I also think he's playing closer to the basket, which is a lot of the reason I think you're seeing him have a little bit of an uptick in scoring. You've seen the number of field goal attempts from inside the restricted area go up about a shot a game. He's actually shooting at about 10% better this year, which is, I think to his credit. You're seeing his points in the paint, like outside of the restricted area, decline. He's shooting fewer of them at a much lower rate. And he just doesn't shoot a lot in the mid range to begin with. I bring all that up to say, like, this is not the iteration of the Oklahoma City Thunder that I think teams are worried about in the postseason. Like, I'm the only guy on the planet saying this right now. But the Oklahoma City Thunder look as good as they look right now because they are one of the few teams in the NBA who are basically running it back of the contenders, right? Like of the top-notch teams, which OKC absolutely is, and I'm not saying that they're not. OKC is one of, if not currently, the best team in the NBA. Part of that is they're coming into the season with built-in chemistry because with the exception of Alex Caruso, who is a player who easily plugs into what OKC is doing. In fact, my argument against the acquisition of Alex Caruso being ground-shattering, like a lot of people said it was, is the fact that there's 17 goddamn Alex Carusos already in Oklahoma City. He plugs in so neatly because there's just a silhouette in his locker waiting for him to step into it because they're already doing with 9 other people exactly what they're going to ask him to do. So I think you see a little bit of this with the Lakers too. Like last week, I talked a lot about how much of an impact JJ Redick has had on the Lakers, and I think that he has. But some of it is the benefit of him basically just running it back, with the exception of Dalton Connect. Like he's instituted more organization and intentionality, misdirection, a lot of screens, off-ball movement, stuff like that. That's designed to get players in a position to succeed. I give him credit for all of that, but he's also just benefiting from the fact that all of these guys know how to play off of each other very well, and that is a true 10 times more in OKC. The iteration of the Oklahoma City Thunder that teams are worried about in the playoffs is, what does this team look like with Isaiah Hartenstein on the floor? All right. And so this is the point that I want to make about Chet. Chet is not a great three-point shooter. Last year, Chet had a good year shooting the ball from three as a third option scorer that teams were sagging off of to help on Shea and Jalen Williams. Chet shot the ball well from beyond the break. And like when he was able to step into a three from the top of the key, it was good. And that carried his 3-point percentage. I think teams are going to see that in the second year and press that shot more, contest it more. And I think you're going to see the percentage from that spot drop a little bit. Once Isaiah Hartenstein's on the floor, that space in and around the rim is going to be more crowded. And it's going to be harder for Chet to finish there. If Chet's 3-point percentage from around the arc, not at the top, but around the arc, if he can't drastically improve that, and he doesn't shoot in the mid-range, he averages about 1 shot in the mid-range per game. And he doesn't score a ton. In fact, he doesn't shoot the ball well in the paint outside of the restricted area. He's currently shooting about 2 currently taking about 2 attempts per game in the paint outside the restricted area, shooting at 36%. So if he can't score in the mid-range and he can't score in the paint outside the restricted area, and he struggles from three anywhere but the top of the key, so defenses know to contest those shots heavily, and you put Hartenstein on the floor and suddenly clog the paint around the rim, I think OKC is going to have to start contending with a lot of the systematic issues that other teams are working out right now. In a couple of weeks, 2, 3, 4 weeks, when Hartenstein comes back, I think that's when you're going to start to see that. And I think the person it's going to impact most is Chet Holmgren.
I think it's going to be interesting because I do think that you are correct to say that one of their big advantages this year is that they're running it back completely, basically, especially without Hartenstein right now.
Yeah. That's it. And that is what I mean by that. The fact that Hartenstein's not out there.
Yeah. And so what is this team going to look like incorporating Hartenstein when he comes back in a couple of weeks? At the same time, no one here, to be very clear, is denying the fact that they've been very good to begin the year. They've been, their defense is quite, has been fantastic, especially, like the guards in particular have been just as devastating as everyone thought they were going to be. But I do think that everyone is getting ahead of themselves, especially for a playoff level, about how this is going to work. Because I think that there are a lot of warning signs right now. Not warning signs is too strong, but there are signs that there are teams and specific styles that could cause them problems. I wonder if we're going to see them go through a bumpy stretch when Hartenstein comes back, because they're going to have to incorporate and change their style, but also teams are going to start to adapt to specifically how they play defense.
Yeah, so I agree with you. Like, the thing with Hartenstein is everything I just said, and I won't rehash it, but I think it's going to clog up stuff for Chet Holmgren and make it more difficult for him to score, force him more into what you saw him be in the Mavericks series last year, kind of a spot-up shooter. And teams are going to force him off of his spot and make him shoot that from places on the floor he's more uncomfortable. I think he's going to have a hard time scoring at the basket. Said I wouldn't rehash the entire thing. The second point I'll make about the addition of Hartenstein is that Oklahoma City, all last season in the playoffs and all up until this point, is playing a true 5-out offense. Hartenstein compromises all of that. You're playing 4-out with Hartenstein sort of moving around the court, setting ball screens and dribble handoffs and stuff like that. I don't think you're going to see teams pressing Hartenstein much defensively. I think they're going to be happy to help off of him. And I think that's going to make things more difficult, not just for Chet, but for other players, but specifically for Chet, because those shots at the rim are going to be harder to get. The third thing, let me ask you this. I agree with you about OKC's defense. They have Dort, Caruso, Wiggins, Isaiah Joe's scrappy on defense, and Shea. Most of those guys, all of them are aggressive defenders. They also have Case and Wallace. All of them are aggressive defenders. And most of them are strong and have some length as well. So of these teams, which team has a point guard that you believe is the type of point guard that can deal with strong, aggressive perimeter defenders with length? The Nuggets. One of their biggest weaknesses.
Yep.
The Atlanta Hawks.
I think that could cause Trae Young some significant problems, honestly.
Trae Young is one of the few players in the league who, and I'll like, if you watch that game too, which I did, I thought it was very interesting. And then OKC did what they've done in a number of games where things are very tight heading into the fourth quarter. And then OKC they separate very quickly in the fourth quarter, and usually on the basis of 3-point shooting. Trae Young's one of the few players in the league who, despite his size, he's so skillful.
Yes.
He can work through a lot of that, and him and Dyson Daniels together were able to get some things done offensively. The Spurs, Chris Paul, but Chris Paul is going to give you minimal minutes, or not minimal, but he's not. You're not. Chris Paul's fine. I think Chris Paul's, but he's not a primary scorer. He's a different animal at this stage in his career.
Paul's not going to be phased. Put it that way. He's not like going to commit a bunch of turnovers, but
no.
he's also not going to break him down. Put it that way.
No, I think that's a great way of saying it. The Trailblazers.
Not even worth discussing.
Yeah. The Clippers. They got James Harden. Also, very tight game.
Yeah.
And then their next opponent is the Magic, who has Franz Wagner, but who can keep them off of them with his size. But my point,
that game is going to be rough.
Yeah, my point is that what we've seen. Oh, and they played the Bulls too. Same thing with the Bulls, though. Yeah. My point is I don't think they've seen any teams that actually match up well with them, except for the surprisingly scrappy Los Angeles Clippers.
Yes, I would agree with that 100%. I think that,
so I'm interested to see what OKC looks like, not just once they get Hartenstein out there and have to start working through that. I'm also interested to see what they look like. We're not going to see them against Dallas for a while. I'd like to see them against the Lakers, a team with some size. I'd like to see them against Timberwolves, somebody like Anthony Edwards.
Yeah, I believe on Wednesday they have the return leg against the Nuggets, and I'm interested to see how that goes. I do think that the Nuggets can play them much better than they did on I believe it was opening night.
It was.
That
was the worst we've seen the Nuggets so far.
That is now this Nuggets team. We're going to analyze in a little more detail. I don't want to get too far on the road, but I do think that you are right that they've had the matchup advantage in every game they played this season. There are some signs they're not shooting that necessarily that well. They're relying on their defense. They're winning a lot of games by holding their opponents to 85 points. Now, trying to spin that as a bad thing is a little much. Like, you held your opponents to 85 points. You do get credit for that, but the questions I had about them at the beginning of the year have largely been unresolved. And I'm excited to see them against some better competition.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's against the better competition part. And I agree with you about the Nuggets. Nuggets could be a little bit more of a window. I still think they'll beat the Nuggets. But I'll say this, and then we can move on to what somehow will be deeper takes than what we've already offered. I seriously doubt that first game left a good taste in Nikola Jokic's mouth. I doubt that the Joker felt good about everybody basically saying Chet Holmgren dominated him. So I'm going to go out on a limb and say I actually don't know their schedule, but if they are playing this week, then I think that whatever day of the week that is, it's going to be a bad day for Chet Holmgren. And the big kicker really isn't Joker in that game. It's the people around him. Because even in that game, Joker was good.
Yeah. No, I think, let's put a pin on that for right now because we have a whole Nugget section coming in about 30 minutes.
Fair enough. Let's jump into our takes. One of our takes, that bastard in Dallas, knew that we were going to talk about this tonight, and so he finally decided to wake up. But we were going to talk about sort of our biggest surprises, good and bad. And I'm a big fan of Luka Doncic. I think I've made that pretty well known in prior episodes. I'm currently wearing a sweatshirt with his Real Madrid jersey on it. But Luka started out slow to start the season. I'm not going to spend much time on this simply because it appears that the slow start came to an end tonight. I think he had 32, 9 and 8 tonight or something like that. The point I'll make about Luka is this. I was watching a video the other day of when he was 15 years old, checking into his first Real Madrid game, going out there and playing very well against grown men as a 15-year-old. Like, my son's 9 years old. And when you hear about kids playing a few years up and dominating in games in the AAU circuit in America, people are like, oh, he's going to be the next big thing. He's going to be playing Division I ball at LSU or whatever, right? And, here's this kid checking into a EuroLeague game for a team like Real Madrid and dominating. And I say all that to say he's just been so good his whole damn life that basketball is easy for him. He's one of the few people who are so good that even NBA games can be easy for him. And I think what you see from him that's sort of disappointing to me is, and I'm not saying he doesn't have the killer instinct. I think probably more than anybody in the NBA right now, he has whatever that is. I think you can see it. I think even in his bad games, you see it happening because suddenly he turns it on in the fourth quarter. But it's the fact that he can just flip a switch in the fourth quarter and suddenly come alive and take a game over. That it's that shot he hit against Minnesota last week where he does a step back from 38 feet away without batting an eye and just knocks it down and then looks at everybody in Minnesota and taunts them. It's the fact that he can do that at the drop of a hat. Just flip that switch that tells you in the first three quarters he wasn't taking it seriously. And it's a very immature attitude that looks at a player playing for a team like Dallas, who are contenders, who are off of a finals run, who have reloaded and are looking to win a championship. It's an immature attitude to step out there and not take it seriously. I think on some level you can hear it in his post-game reaction that he recognizes that and that he has to be better. And tonight he was much better. Before I kick it over to you and see if you want to add anything to this Luka take, I'll just simply say the thing about him playing bad too is he's still averaging like 28 points a game, 9 rebounds and 8 assists. That's the problem. It's like 27, 9 and 8 or something like that through those first 4 or 5 games. He's such a good rebounding guard. He's such a good playmaker. He spaces the floor for you so well. He's such an offensive threat that he still makes you better even when he's not playing well. But he should be right up at the top in the MVP race, and he hasn't been playing like that thus far. He did tonight. I was glad to see it. But I think that the best version of Luka Doncic of the Dallas Mavericks is with Luka Doncic stepping out on the floor every night looking to prove that he's the best player in the world and that the Mavericks are finals contenders.
Yeah, I think that some of the disappointment is related to the fact that the Mavericks are, trying to bring in major pieces, honestly, in Thompson, in Marshall, in Grimes. They're trying to incorporate some stuff. So there's the natural sort of this hurdle to overcome with that. There's this lack of chemistry. Thompson in particular plays very different than Derek Jones Jr. did. Marshall struggled since he came in. Grimes has as well. But all this is just natural growing pains. But the other one, and this will pair well with the Spurs section we're going to do next, is I think there was a hope, especially from Dallas fans, about how good Luka was in the playoffs, how clinical and the killer instinct that the Mavs showed last year in the playoffs, and at the end of the season last year. Honestly, they after the trade deadline, they were a completely different team. That you were going to see this team come in on a mission. They like the Spurs were after they lost the finals in 2013. How they came back in 2014, were like, no, we're going to win it this year. And there was a determination throughout. Something we've seen with the Celtics begin the year. And instead, what we've seen is a team that's kind of toying with its food a lot. They are very, very good. Luka, I think bored is the best way to do that. He looks a little like he's not. What you see, he locks in the fourth quarter. He's like, okay, we're going to win this game.
Yeah.
There's a lot. There's some toying with the food. I think you've seen it. I think you can see the coaching staff's a little frustrated with some other players. I think Lively, after being told that he was going to have a starting position at the beginning of the year and be on the bench, I think that there's been some, you know, if you read between the lines, comments in the coaching staff that they feel that he may not have been playing as the high level they want him to play at the beginning of the year, and there may be some issues there. I think that other issues are just sort of like they're trying to like the Mavs went from a team that had very little depth to suddenly having 12 or 10 or 11, 12 people that you could legitimately play, and they're trying to figure that out. So, like, where does Spencer Dinwiddie fit in all this is a really good question. Where does Grimes fit in all this? They're trying to figure out, so, what the rotation is. But I do think it should work itself out. But I will say that, this is a team that has a talent to come out of the West again. But there is a risk for them that if they start, if they believe that they have the West locked down, I think that there are teams in the West that could compete with them. I think OKC could, could beat them. And if OKC, if they don't take this seriously enough or they don't key in, they still have 75 plus games. It's not like no reason to press the alarm button right now. But I would like them to see them lock in. And what we saw today with the absolute, I mean, it wasn't even demolitions wrong, like pulverization of Orlando was really great to see. And I think it's a sign that we may be turning that corner.
Yeah, I mean, with Orlando, like they're down Paolo. I don't think that. I think they win that game, even if Paolo's out there the way they were playing. It certainly would have been much closer. But they can't control whether Paolo's hurt or not. And what you expect from a team is to step out on the floor with a team that they should beat, and they beat them decisively. And that's what they did. They got the lead and they never looked back. My only concern with Dallas, I actually think what's probably going on with Lively is kind of twofold. I think for one, we were texting earlier and you mentioned how Gafford sort of has the package to be an elite center if he can kind of put it all together. And I think there are flashes of that with Gafford that sort of intrigues Jason Kidd. Also think Jason Kidd greatly values experience and sort of is the type of coach that wants you to earn everything that you get. And I think he sees dangling the starting position in front of Lively as a way of pushing him to maximize his potential and get everything out of him that he can. My concern is that, we got to see more than one game, but tonight was the first night where they weren't running a lot of these sort of new sets that have Luka off ball. You've seen Luka's usage decrease a little bit. You see him coming off ball, not initiating the offense as much. And I think a lot of that's designed to get Klay Thompson more intentionally involved, where he knows where his shots are coming from so that he can step into them and get a rhythm. And I think that's 100% necessary. I think that the focus tonight was more about Luka getting out of his funk and into his groove. And so they sort of reverted back to Luka being on ball and initiating the offense more and returning to sort of like, his standard usage level. And my concern is that in that situation, Klay Thompson doesn't get into a rhythm. Now, Najee Marshall did. Tonight was the best we've seen Najee Marshall. Najee Marshall likes to get out and run. Dallas also had a focus on increasing the pace. But if, Luka in the MVP sort of version of Luka is the system. Yes. And Dallas is going to have to figure out a way to incorporate Klay Thompson through that system, not change that system in order to get Klay Thompson going. And if they can't do that, then the best version of it may be staggering minutes where Klay Thompson's out there more with other people. Now, the problem is it's not really that different when Luka's on the bench and Kyrie's on the floor. It sort of becomes the Kyrie show in that time period. So I think they're going to have to figure out ways to create looks for Klay Thompson with Luka out there and Luka being the system rather than trying to change that system. One other surprise from the surprise-ish. I think I'm surprised. Anthony Davis's start to this season has been absolutely incredible. I definitely think that I expected to see Anthony Davis playing well this year. I mean, I'm not surprised by that. But like right now, we're looking at 32 points a game. 32 points a game, 12 rebounds, and 2 block shots a game. We're looking at a legitimate MVP campaign from Anthony Davis. Now, whether or not they're going to have the win total or be relevant enough in the West for him to act, I mean, like Luka last year, I think they finished 4th or 5th in the West, and that was sort of the thing that precluded him from winning the award. I don't necessarily like that rule. And I'm not necessarily talking about whether Anthony Davis will actually win it. I'm just saying he's playing at that level. The only time we've really seen anything that slowed that pace was with the game we were talking about earlier with the Cleveland Cavaliers, with Evan Mobley and Jared Allen being able to converge on him at the same time and sort of force the ball out of his hands and make it more difficult to run the offense through them. The Lakers do a very good job, though, when AD's on ball, of cutting, particularly in like a high post situation, of cutting to the basket. And I wouldn't describe AD as a playmaker, but he is a good passer from that position. So, I mean, we know what type of defensive presence AD is. I don't think that – I know I'm not surprised. I don't think you're surprised that he's capable of this level of offensive production. I'm not even skeptical of the idea that he can sustain this level of offensive production. I think the Lakers should have shifted to an offense that features him more and let LeBron pick and choose his spots a while ago. I think everybody, including Darvin Ham, believed that. I think Darvin Ham failed to devise a strategy and execute a strategy that realized that goal. But I think everybody realized that was the best option. So what are your thoughts about what Anthony Davis is doing out in LA? And first of all, are you even surprised by
it? I think that the best way to say it is I have absolutely seen him score 32 points, have 12 rebounds and 3 assists on high level shooting before. And in fact, I've seen him do it in playoff series against like the Nuggets. I think that what has been surprising to me is after, what is this, year 5 or 6 for him in LA now? Like ever since he's come to LA, there's been this talk about how he would finally take the torch from LeBron and be the major player of the team. And it just never seemed to happen. Like, it wasn't like he had a small role, but it was clearly LeBron's team. This is clearly his team this year.
Yes.
He is clearly the number one, and there's clear buy-in on everyone involved in that this is the case. He has been.
Let me ask you a question about that. Is that coaching?
Yes, I would have to say it is, because I don't think that he was capable of this last year. He showed this in spurts. In fact, in the playoff series against Nuggets, this is basically a replication of a stat line he put in the Nuggets series. But this is basically the first time that they've come out and they've clearly made this a purpose this year. I think this is absolutely from JJ Redick. And I think there was kind of a head fake from him that, AD's going to shoot a bunch of threes. He shoots he's shooting a couple more than he did last year, but they're primarily playing in the post. And they're running the offense through him. I think it's a genius move. And I think that it's absolutely the right move with an older LeBron because, as we talked about before, the Lakers, LeBron at this point gives you 12 really, really good minutes a game, and then he has to pace himself the rest of the time. And by having AD take the main workload for the most of the game, you're allowing LeBron to conserve his energy for the fourth quarter, where he can go, balls to the wall and try to close the game out for them. And it's also getting the other offensive pieces involved more. It's getting Reeves is really enjoying this.
That's the point. I think is almost more important. Like I think the LeBron piece is important, and I think that I don't want to crawl in Darvin Ham's mind, but if I were to do so, I think that what Darvin Ham envisioned in terms of like running the offense through LeBron through AD is more of AD and LeBron kind of running a 2-man game, which is fine and well. And they still do that and it's effective. But what you've seen is, with Austin Reeves in particular, you've seen him take a little bit of a jump this year.
Yep.
I think that, you could make the argument that him going, he basically averaged 15 points a game last year and is averaging 17 points a game this year. That could be easily seen as just part of his natural development. That's not really the point I'm making. I think what you really see the big jump from Austin Reeves on is his playmaking.
Absolutely.
As an on-ball player who's creating offense for everybody else on the floor, Austin Reeves has taken a major leap. The other person I'd point to is Rui Hachimura. Rui Hachimura's ability to get open looks from three that he can knock down and also attack closeouts and score at the rim is really being created by the in and out game with Anthony Davis. Anthony Davis forcing the defense to collapse on him and then kick it back out has made life very easy for Rui Hachimura.
No, he's been fantastic. What we're seeing from Reeves, Reeves had that, was it 2 years ago, where he just came out of the blue, literally out of the blue. He was a freaking two-way player before this. In the second half of the season 2 years ago, and then continued his explosion in the playoffs. And there was anyone who watched him, you said, does this guy have potential to be like a legitimate all-star player, like perennial all-star player after that? And last year he was good, but he plateaued. And the thing that really plateaued was the playmaking. Like in the playoffs 2 years ago, he flashed.
100% agree. 100% agree.
He flashed the ability in not just like during games, but in crunch time to run the offense, at a really, really elite level. And they just completely went away from it last year. And then a lot of it was due to the fact that they were yanking him in and out of the rotation.
There was something weird going on with him and Darvin Ham early in the season. It was strange.
Yeah. And then it got to the point where there was a weird thing where Ham sort of believed there was like a Highlander situation going on with him and D'Lo, where only one of them could play. And then and he really wanted. He seemed to envision Reeves as like sort of this spot up shooter more than a playmaker, which again does not make sense because he was the coach 2 years ago as well. So he'd been the coach when Reeves sort of exploded. But not to get like too far sidetracked, he's back to being the secondary ball handler of the Lakers. Like he's secondary after LeBron. He's the secondary.
I don't think that's arguable. Yeah. I think that's an observable fact.
Yeah, and with the way LeBron plays, where he hibernates the wrong word, but he basically takes a step back for large chunks, like usually the second and third quarter are basically the moments he does this. That means that Reeves is the one leading to initiating the offense in a lot of cases, and he's again showing this year he has the ability to do that at a really high level, and I think that's been he's been the player who's taking the biggest jump aside from Davis.
I think if you go all the way back to that playoff run you're talking about when they got to the Western Conference Finals and you sort of saw him emerge during the playoffs as a legitimate potential all-star player.
Yep.
I think it became obvious during that run that the player on the court LeBron trusted most as a playmaker and in crunch time running the offense with. In crunch time back then, the offense was being run through LeBron. But the player he trusted most as a playmaker was Austin Reeves.
Absolutely.
And I think that you could convene a conference of scholars to explain to me what the hell was going on with Austin Reeves last year, and why his role seemed to be diminished. Because Austin Reeves, like me and you've noticed this before as well. If you put Austin Reeves standing on a 3-point line wide open and just catching and shooting a three stationary, I don't like it that much. If you move him back 3 feet off the 3-point line and ask him to shoot a deep three, if you have him coming in motion off of a screen where he can catch it, and like Austin Reeves creating contact in the paint and getting to the free throw line on shots is sort of, one of his greatest assets. That's been observable for a while now. He's doing that on 3-point shots now. He's very Norman Powell-ish in that way. And so I think that J.J. Redick is utilizing Austin Reeves in a way that Darvin Ham never did. And I think there's a couple of reasons for that. I think that J.J. Redick is a better coach than Darvin Ham. But I also think that J.J. Redick because it's like a Rubik's Cube. Or maybe that's a bad example. It's like a puzzle. It's like going into an escape room. You're not going to discover the final clue without discovering all the preceding clues. You know what I mean?
100%.
J.J. Redick unlocked the core piece, which is executing a strategy to run the offense through Anthony Davis. And having done that, you unlock everything else. I think that's the key to the Lakers' success. Now, I think they have a ceiling. But Anthony Davis being the primary focus of the offense has enabled LeBron to pick and choose his spots without feeling like he has to sort of break hibernation, as you say. And then the Lakers are forced to milk him for 40 minutes where he's exhausted. I think that's the biggest takeaway, the biggest advantage the Lakers acquire from running the offense through Anthony Davis. I think the second biggest advantage that they acquire it unlocks Austin Reeves' playmaking ability, because Austin Reeves is a player who can get in the lane, score, get in the lane, create contact, get to the free throw line, and then all of that compromises the defense when he starts to penetrate, which opens his playmaking ability. And then the next thing I think they unlocked is the in and out game with Rui Hachimura makes life easier for him. The piece they have not unlocked yet is how the hell D'Lo fits into all this. And I think that's because somebody accidentally put a clue in the escape room that doesn't go with this particular room. And there's no figuring it out. I really do believe that if the Lakers are going to, I think they're going to be much better than they were last year. But I think if we're really going to talk about them contending, there's a couple things that are going to have to happen. One of them is either there's going to have to be a trade that involves D'Lo. And they also have another problem that emerged yesterday. And that is particularly as it pertains to Denver. I have no question marks about whether Anthony Davis can maintain this level of offensive production against Jokic. He's demonstrated that he can. The problem for the Lakers is that you can maintain that level of offensive production and still not win the game.
Yeah.
Now, you might be able to argue, well, that was without this version of Rui Hachimura and without this version of Austin Reeves. And you could also obviously argue that this is not the same Denver Nuggets that we've seen in recent years. But I suspect what you're really going to need to go into a Denver series and feel comfortable about your chances of pulling it off is another defender that you can put on Jokic and have Anthony Davis coming over help side. And the guy that I think they currently have there, and I think they've been, scouring the market for a center that they could bring in to do that they trust more than Jackson Hayes. But Jackson Hayes appears to have stumbled into, one of the worst kinds of trouble that you can stumble into. And we'll see how that plays itself off court. But, you could be looking at an extended Jackson Hayes absence in LA too. I don't know how much that affects their season per se. But I think in the postseason, they're going to need another center, and they're going to have to find a way to move D'Lo. And if that's not the case, they're going to need to get a really good draw in the playoffs.
I completely agree with all that. I think that the reality is the Lakers are still a piece away from being a true contender status. And I think that they are. I think you're going to see them make a big move this during the season. At least I hope they do, because this is a team that I don't know if there's anything that you can do absent like you getting like a total steal of a trade that makes you guys favorites for the title. But this is a team that could be legitimately a contender with a couple tweaks here and there. And Lakers last year didn't make any real moves at the deadline. I hope that they are more willing to pull the trigger this year than they were last year.
I agree. I mean, I think like if you're looking to make an argument for house, how they do it without anything fundamentally changing, I mean, I think it's a big if, but like I think that you see Austin Reeves continue to demonstrate his ability as a playmaker, as an on-ball player. Him and LeBron sort of splitting that role throughout the game with the starting lineup, and then getting Vanderbilt back, and Vanderbilt being what you wanted him to be and being healthy. I mean, I have a lot of question marks about Vanderbilt's availability and whether or not that's ever going to happen. But if you do have Vanderbilt back, and then suddenly you have a strong perimeter defender with some length, and you can take D'Lo off the court and put that responsibility more in the hands of Austin Reeves and LeBron James, and you have Dalton Connect continue to sort of stay on his progression, I think that could be an interesting fit. But all of that is contingent upon Anthony Davis. And I bring him up as one of my big surprises because I think that the Lakers are really outperforming expectations of virtually everyone, including their fans. And I think that all hinges. I think the entire team is playing better because of what Anthony Davis is doing. Let's move from there to another center. Maybe a center, maybe a shooting guard. Who the hell knows? Let's go down to San Antonio. What's going on with Wemby?
Good question. I think that there was a lot of hype and a lot of excitement about Wemby to begin the year in Spurs circles. He had a up and down Olympics, but ended on a really high note with the gold medal game where he played fantastic. He ended the year last year really strong. There was this hope for a big jump in year two. And one of the things that happened into last year was he didn't necessarily stop taking as many threes, but there was a concerted effort to get him the ball in the post and to see him attack the rim, which really helped him break out after the All-Star break. And what we've seen this year is, he's still piled up stats in some games, including a 5x5 game, but it's honestly been really disappointing to be in the year. He has, come out of the gate in the first 5-6 games, where he's mostly just been really content bombing away from three-point land. There's been a distinct lack of aggression and a lack of intensity when he's playing both on offense and on defense. He started to pick it up a little bit more, but for the first 3 to 4 games, all the way through the game with Thunder, where Chet thoroughly just whooped his ass. You would rarely see him break into a full sprint. There he was getting pushed out of the paint all the way to the 3-point line by 6'4", 6'5" guards, and to compounding all that, his handle's been really loose. Like he's been losing the ball. And he has shown no ability. Like this is some of a new thing. He's shown no ability to hold the ball through contact. Anyone who pokes the ball out of his hand, it's really easy to just knock it fully out of his arms. So all of this added together to a really, really underwhelming start of the season. It's also reignited the debate about Wemby that's been raging online ever since he came into the league, which is what's the best way to develop him? My personal belief is that this is a player that to reach his full potential, we need to have him play more like Hakeem Olajuwon and like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Play him in the post. You saw that against Minnesota. This is a guy who, in one step, can you saw Nas Reed, where he takes, I believe, 2 steps and he goes from outside the paint on one end to fully underneath the hoop on a crossover. And, he has a touch to develop a lethal post-game hook shot. If I were in charge, I'd lock him in a room and force him to watch 1,000 hours of Kareem Abdul-Jabbar tape before he can come out. But the flip side, and this is the one that seems to be embraced at least publicly by the Spurs, is this idea that the best way to have him develop is basically to focus on developing his perimeter skills, namely his 3-point shooting, his working on teaching him and having him develop how to break down the defense off the dribble, try to get in the paint. And Wemby is very clear at this point is personally inclined to want to be a perimeter player. That is what he wants to do. He is at his heart, in his heart, a shooting guard. And so part of the issue you see is when you have these smaller guys push him out, outside to the perimeter, he doesn't put up that much resistance. I think a lot of that is he doesn't want to. He's very comfortable getting the ball in the perimeter. That's where he wants to get it. He wants to do the really fancy moves. But right now, as you point out many times, he is too tall and he does not have his handle is not tight enough to be able to break down smaller defenders off the dribble. They just they can just swipe the ball out from in front of him because his base is so much taller than everyone else. It doesn't matter how good his moves are, he just can't get the ball close enough to the floor. It's to make this an effective move. And so you're seeing a lot of turnovers. You're seeing a lot of drives that are aborted literally at the beginning of it. And honestly, the frustrating part is that anyone watching can see that this can all be avoided if he just adopted a different strategy and attacking a line drive type of method. Using his offhand to create space. That's just as effective. But right now, what he's trying to do is be too cute. There's a lot of too cute. There's a lot of trying to pull off the really stylish play. And, I have significant questions about whether the strategy the Spurs are employing to develop Wemby is the right one. Personally, what I think he should be focusing on is not what they are clearly prioritizing. There is a pretty big rift in the Spurs world, the Spurs fan world, about the best way to develop him. And do I think this is going to permanently scar him? No, but I do think that you could have a situation where he took 13 threes in a game already this year. He took 7 threes last night, even though he was 6 for 7 from 2-point range. This focus into making him a perimeter player is going to, I think, stunt his development by not allowing him to focus on the actual skills that are going to make him potentially one of the most dominant players of all time, which is, can he maximize his play in the post? Can he maximize his play in the mid-range? So yeah, all in all, it's been a pretty frustrating, first 2 weeks for Spurs fans. The rest of the team is also a mess. There's no spacing. The lineups they're playing at times make no sense. They're playing Castle, who can't shoot. Jeremy Sohan, who really can't shoot, who's been very, very good otherwise. Chris Paul starting to get his feet underneath him, but he was struggling to begin the year and was having some chemistry issues with Wemby, but now that's starting to figure itself out. I think my hope is that when Vassell returns in a couple minutes, Devin Vassell was their shooting guard, was a big piece of their offense last year, that you're going to see some of this naturally sort of fix itself out. But, the Spurs have this situation where their 3 core young pieces are Wemby, Sohan, and Castle, and none of them can really shoot. And none of that, I think Wemby eventually will be good shooters, but Castle and Sohan, you would have to get lucky for them to turn into the positive value shooters. And I don't, I have questions about whether that is the right strategy of pieces to surround Wemby with long term. And there might need to be some major changes going forward.
Yeah, I mean, so a couple things. I won't take too long with this, but I completely agree about the driving from the perimeter, trying to take people off the dribble. I think if you are going to do it, you have to clear the space with your off arm and it's a straight line drive where you're overpowering the guy, not trying to outfox him. For a couple of reasons. You mentioned when you're that tall, it for one, what you're starting to see teams do with Wemby is they're not matching him up with their center.
Yeah.
Because he's not playing like a center. So I'm not going to put, Derek Lively on you if you want to stand out there at the 3-point line because you're shooting 26% from three. So I'm not worried about that. In fact, my game plan would be to try to bait you into shooting as many of those as I could, because that's going to that's going to lead to a lot of empty possessions, a really inefficient offense, and it's going to be easy for us to outscore you that way. So I'm going to put Pete, and then two, I'm going to say, like, well, if I want you to shoot threes, what's the other scoring option? If you're going to position yourself out there, it's going to be to try to take me off the dribble. So I'm going to put not Derek Lively, but PJ Washington. I'm going to put someone who can get lower and really complicate you taking, these dribble drives from the perimeter. And I think you saw it with Dylan Brooks. I think you saw it with PJ Washington. Teams are going to play him that way. And if you're just going to bomb away from three or play right into what they're doing and try to take them off the dribble, then you're not going to punish them for having a guy who's a solid foot shorter than you guarding you. And so I think that's a problem. But even if, let's imagine that because I think this is one of the problems you've seen from Wemby this year, even if he is able to get past you with his dribble, the problem is he had to get so low to get past you with his dribble. He's not moving that fast. You can't move that fast when you're that low, relative to how tall he is. And then two, I have to cover so much ground on my gather to get up for the shot. Everybody knows once you get the ball above your head, if you're Wemby, really, once you get the ball to your neck, if you're Wemby, the play's over. So their play on the ball is from the low gather off the dribble up. So they're looking to knock that ball out of his hands as soon as he goes to gather. And that's where you're seeing a lot of Wemby's turnovers happen, like where he's driving and they're swiping the ball as he goes to bring it up. And once you get down around the rim, like it's so crowded down there, it's just not going to work. I agree with you completely, like about his mindset. I mean, where you put your resources tells you what you value.
Yes.
And Wemby chose to put his time, energy, and money into training with Jamal Crawford, who's an incredible basketball player, had phenomenal skill set. None of it is what Wemby should be trying to emulate. It does appear to be what he wants to be. And I do think this is something he's going to have to learn the hard way. Now, with all that said, the guy is so freakishly tall, and combines that with athleticism someone that tall should never possess, that he's able to just stumble into good stat lines anyway.
Oh yeah, I mean he's still averaging 18 and 10 this year.
Yeah, with what, like 2-4 blocks a game?
Yeah, so with 3 blocks and 1 steal. Yeah.
And then all of this needs to be caveated with the fact that, at least according to reports, he's basically had some sort of like allergen-induced cold since he arrived in San Antonio. And I know from having family there that San Antonio is one of the worst cities in the country for allergies, because I have bad seasonal allergies, and every time I go there, I suffer this. So I don't disbelieve that he's had a cold. We can argue about how much that should actually impact an NBA player doing their job. But it clearly impacted him, in my opinion. Like, I don't think he's too out of shape to like hustle, like that kind of thing. And then I think another thing that will help clear it up is I think that the way a lot of these teams approach game planning is they want to get a certain number of threes up. And when you look at the roster as it's currently constructed, I think they're giving Wemby a little more leeway to take more of these threes than they will when Devin Vassell comes back, because I think they're going to want Devin Vassell to have a fair number of shots from the perimeter as well. And so I think some of those shots are going to have to go to Vassell. And so, because look, if it doesn't, and you're just talking about adding Devin Vassell's 3-point shots I mean, we're like the Spurs are just bombing away at that point. And so, I mean, Wemby's definitely had a slow start. I think that we should go ahead and make a commitment, though, to do the Wemby start 2.0 in 2 weeks. And let's see what he's looked like after this cold has definitely worked its way out of his system. Because and also I'd love to know, when do they play the Nuggets again? Not the Nuggets, the Thunder. Do you happen to know that?
I can pull that up right now. Let's see.
Because I have a feeling after the way that OKC game went against Chet, given the rivalry, given that Chet Holmgren is the name that we shall not mention, according to Wemby, I have a November 19th.
Yep.
I'll go ahead and mark that on my calendar and make a commitment that Sunday we're going to revisit. We're going to revisit the Wemby start 2.0 because I have a feeling that we're going to see a different version of Wemby by then. I'm not saying that shooting guard Wemby will be laid to rest and that post-play Wemby will be resurrected in its full glory and that moving forward we'll never have conversations about him shooting too many step-back threes again. But I do think that we're going to see a more aggressive, more tenacious, more around the rim Wemby next time he plays OKC, and I think he will be out there to prove a point that Chet Holmgren is a good player, but he's a gnat on an elephant's ass when compared to Wemby.
Yeah, he's got to prove it, but I agree. I'll tie a bow with on this section by saying, look, if Wemby wants to be a shooting guard, he's really got to work on the shooting part of this. He's right now on 6.8 attempts from three. He's shooting 22% from 3-point range. On 8 2-pointers a game, he's shooting 60.4, which I think shows you right where his natural skills may lie.
What percentage is he shooting?
From three?
Yeah.
22.
Okay, so that's bad. But let me say this, because I don't know that I would shoot much worse than 22 if you put me out there. But Chet's shooting 29% from three on 4 attempts per game.
Yeah.
One of the things I'll give, I think it should be noted, Chet's not jacking up crazy threes. Very rarely in a game will you see Chet put the ball on the ground, dribble behind the back, step back, 3-point shot. If Chet shoots a three, it is almost always a catch and shoot three. And it is almost always, by NBA standards, an open look. So Chet deserves credit for having a saner shot diet from three than Wemby does. However, I'm not going to sit here and haggle over is 22 or 29% from three better. They're both shit. All right. And Wemby is shooting 22% from three on high difficulty level shots that I'll be the first to admit he should never take them.
He's shooting logo 3-pointers. Like
he's shooting. He is shooting a Steph Curry like shot diet. Not to the volume Steph shoots, but Steph has every right to shoot that volume. Wemby has no business doing, pound cross dribble between, behind the back, step back three, fading out of bounds. Like there's no business with Wemby ever doing that unless when he got the ball, there was 2 seconds. Honestly, because of his height, unless Bowl's out there, he still shouldn't do that, even if the shot clock's low, because he doesn't have to create space. Just get the damn ball above your head and shoot it. What the fuck is the point of the step back? You don't even need it. You're 7'4". Just shoot the damn ball. The space was created by God. You don't need to do anything with the dribble for the 3-point shot. And so I think if you were to take Wemby's 3-point shot diet and just distill it down to just those shots that make sense, he's a much better 3-point shooter than Chet. Is this me just hating on Chet, or does what I'm saying make sense?
I think that there's a chance of that. I will say I saw Chet last year shoot really, a much higher percentage than he's shooting this year.
I agree. I'll retract what I said. Say the jury's still out. We'll see. Chet, look, the comparisons, which I know you said just put a bow on it. There's just one, like, comparing Chet and Wemby, which a lot of people have done since that game, and they've compared them as though, like, Chet is better. Like, put aside all the prodigy hype about Wemby, the greatest draft prospect, since Jesus was a boy and all that stuff. They're doing two fundamentally different things too. Like, Chet is the second or third option on possibly the best team in the NBA. Yes. Wemby is the first option on possibly the worst team in the NBA. I mean, they're not the worst team in the NBA, but they're down there.
Oh, without him, they're the worst team in the league by far. Yeah.
Yeah. So, like, this is comparing apples to center blocks. This is just not the same thing, right? Like, Wemby is in a completely different situation with a completely different set of responsibilities than Chet. And I think that as things level out over the course of the year, I think you're right to point out that I sound like an insane person with the 3-point shot comparison with Chet, because Wemby's never shot it at the percentage that Chet shot it last year. But I think I'm also right to say that the looks Chet's getting are very different than the looks Wemby gets because of the different 100%. Responsibilities and the different teams that they're on. All right. So, as bad as things have been for Wemby, which, they've been baddish, whatever, but there's one place where things have been worse. And that is in Milwaukee. If there is ever anything that has gone to hell in a handbasket, it is the Milwaukee Bucks. And I'm going to let you really start in on this. But I'll say this to start it. With the exception of one game, Dame and Giannis have played very well. And if you go back to our earlier podcasts, we were talking about, particularly in our Eastern Conference power rankings to start the season, we talked about if Dame and Giannis are playing well, Milwaukee is a contender in the East. And I think both of us thought, they'd have this extra, they had a full year, they had the chemistry time. Dame had all the things, were moving from Portland to Milwaukee, going through a divorce. There's a lot of reasons why last year was a difficult year for Damian Lillard. And I think that, like, the dude's human. He deserved that grace period. I thought that him and Giannis would build this chemistry. They'd come into this season rolling. And quite frankly, they have. Giannis is averaging 31 and 12, and Dame's averaging 26 and 6. If I was to be able to go back to the day we recorded the Eastern Conference Power Rankings podcast and we talked about the Milwaukee Bucks, and I told you, I have it on good authority from my future self, that 2 weeks into the season, Dame and Giannis would be averaging 57 points, 17 rebounds, and 13 assists, where would you put Milwaukee in the Eastern Conference based on just that fact?
Second or third.
And while
without even blinking, just be like, I just pencil them in.
Yes. And with that fact being just a cold, hard fact, Dame had last night, Dame had an incredible game. Damian Lillard last night went for 41, on 54% shooting, 10 of 15 from 3. Giannis had 34 and 16 on 55% shooting, 15 of 27 from the floor. They lost the damn game. If I would have told you that Dame and Giannis were going to combine for 75 points on a combined 55% shooting, and between the two of them, they would have 20 rebounds and 18 assists, and asked you, do they win or lose the game? I don't even think I need you to tell me who they're playing against to tell you I think they win the game.
Yeah.
And yet, this has been the Bucks' season with Dame and Giannis. They're 1-5, and they're 15th in the Eastern Conference. What in the hell is going on in Milwaukee?
Well, they are. Their net rating is negative 7.0, which is the only teams that are worse are the Pelicans, the Wizards, the Blazers, the Sixers, who I believe you suited up for them in one game because they were so hurt. And that was when you had a torn ACL, so that's pretty bad. And the Utah Jazz, who impressively have a negative 18 net rating. I just wanted to bring that up because that's still one of my favorite stats. But they're bottom 10 in offensive rating and bottom 10 in defensive rating, which is usually a bad combination. They have a situation where their two main players outscore the rest of the team combined, which is another situation which can tend to be a little dicey. And more problematically, they have no athleticism or shooting outside of their front two, outside of Lillard and Giannis. And I mean, quite frankly, I know what Milton's missing, but this team is junk. Like this team is old and it's junk. Like Brook Lopez is still good. He would still be effective in a limited role, like Al Horford. I think he would be very effective. Like
if somehow the Bucks decided to blow that up and sent him to Los Angeles, completely different team.
Completely different team. But Al Horford is not the third best player on the Boston Celtics. In fact, he is somewhere in the 6th or 7th range, and that's what we're talking about. We're talking about a pure role player. He is clearly the third best player on this team. Bobby Portis has been bad. Gary Trent Jr. has, I mean, this is early days, but he is shooting 30% from the field, 25% from three, and is playing 30.8 minutes a game and only averaging 8.7 points. Connaughton has disappeared. I mean, he's borderline unplayable at this point. And to make matters worse, they have a really short rotation. They're playable. Their playable rotation.
Let's go back and put an exclamation point on the Connaughton thing, because their championship year wasn't that long ago.
No,
Connaughton was an invaluable role player on that team.
100%.
This dude is shooting 29% from the floor and 26% from three.
He's averaging less than 4 points a game.
He has a true shooting percentage, and let's remember his value on that team.
Shooting
was he was an athletic shooter.
Yes.
He has a true shooting percentage right now of 41%, ranking 285th in the NBA.
Yeah.
You literally could replace his 3-point shooting with Wemby's, which you were just dogging on.
Yeah.
And
dramatic improvement.
It's rough.
It's rough. They, and to make matters worse, they're supposed to have a big two. Lillard cannot defend anymore. He legitimately, he is getting picked on mercilessly by by opposing teams who are just running him into screen and rolls every possession on the court. This team needs to be blown up. And I know this is the Middleton.
Let me say this about the defense with Lillard, because I don't disagree with you about that, but I also think like that's something everybody kind of knew what they were getting into with Lillard when he came to Milwaukee. And I think that was one of the reasons why Gary Trent Jr. was supposed to be so important.
Yes.
Last night, I think it was last night in the Cleveland game where Giannis and Dame combined for like 70 and whatever, 70, 20, and 16 or whatever it was. Lillard hits high difficulty level, step back, 18-footer, knocks it down to take the lead with 9 seconds left in the game. That was sort of the exclamation point on what had been a remarkable game from Damian Lillard. 9 seconds left. Cleveland calls timeout after the shot. They inbound the ball at half court. They inbound it. Like, even if you'd never watched the game, didn't know any of it, if I said, who do they give the ball to? Everybody knows who that ball is going to.
Yes.
Gary Trent Jr. is matched up on Donovan Mitchell when they inbound the ball to him. They leave Gary Trent Jr. on an island with Donovan Mitchell. Donovan Mitchell doesn't look for a switch. They don't run any action to get him an open look. It's just a clean inbound to Donovan Mitchell with Gary Trent Jr. just lined up on him and one-on-one, mano-a-mano, ISO basketball. The fact that they don't feel any need to create any separation for Donovan Mitchell, they don't feel like they need to run a screen. They don't feel like they need to run some fancy inbound play. Nothing. Just get the ball to Donovan. He'll take care of it. They don't care about Gary Trent Jr. Like, to me, that's emblematic of a serious problem with your defensive backcourt. And two, I think it's also sort of bad coaching. Because with 9 seconds left in the game, I know that ball is going to Donovan Mitchell. I've got help coming from somewhere, and I'm going to force Donovan Mitchell to recognize that and make a split-second decision and get that ball to somebody else and force them to put the shot up. I'm not going to let it be Donovan Mitchell. I'm not
100%.
impressed with Doc Rivers thus far is the point of my story.
I'm not. There is absolutely no explanation why they have not signed Dennis Smith Jr. This, they're, he can't shoot. Gary Trent Jr. can't shoot right now. Dennis Smith Jr. can guard point of attack. He is athletic. He's
Lonnie Walker.
Lonnie Walker.
Lonnie Walker can shoot a little.
Get some fucking athletes on this team. It is staggering. This is a team that is old. It has been old for 2 years. They've needed to shuffle the deck chairs on the Titanic a little bit. At least try it. And they're not doing any of it, and it drives me crazy. Bobby Portis is a good player. He is redundant on this team. Like, they need their problem is not backup big. Lopez can still give them 30 points a night. They can find players. And, the bigger overarching issue is that the front office has, and we're going to talk about this, in our last section, which is going to be Denver. Their front office has abjectly failed their superstar now for 3 years running. Yes. They cannot draft. They cannot draft. This Marshawn Beauchamps, thing, they haven't given he's been done a disservice by this team because he's never been given a chance to even show he can compete. But he didn't really make a lot of sense at the time on their picks. They keep on drafting these sort of project players who they don't ever play, and they never have players at the positions of need. The players that they make wild ass trades. This is a team that had Dante DiVincenzo and traded him for the desiccated husk that was Serge Ibaka at that point. And I believe this is Serge Ibaka coming off of back surgery even. That was an insane trade a couple of years ago. He's the only good first round pick they've had in the last probably.
No, they've got that one kid who, I mean, he hasn't proven himself to be a good pick yet, but
AJ's going to be good. But he's a project player in a year where they need players now, and I know, and it's not his fault. But they drafted him, and in the first 3 games of the year, I believe he's played a grand total of 3 minutes.
Yeah.
Like
Well, and he's not really what they need right now.
no, and so I think he makes a lot of sense as a pick, but not in the scenario, not in the context of what they need now. They, like everyone says, oh well, like they have no more assets. Like, well, would you trust this team to draft a good player if they had their picks anyways? No, no, there's no, and furthermore, these are the type of teams that need to rely on the minimum contract market. And like they made puzzling decisions. I mean, like they put a bunch of they bet a lot on DeLon Wright, who is an okay player, but that never made sense to me. Um,
Oh, a player that would have made a lot more sense for them, like really needing it.
Yeah.
They should have gone out in the offseason and really competed for a player like Derrick Jones Jr.
Yeah.
Like somebody. I mean, I'm not going to describe him as a shooter. He'll have his moments. But like that's ultimately why Dallas, wasn't dead set on re-signing him. But he brings athleticism and defense for sure, which they desperately need.
No, and this whole Middleton stuff. Wait for Middleton. Middleton had just had surgery on both his ankles. Like, he's been hurt constantly for the last 3 years, ever since he hurt his hamstring in the playoffs a couple, was it 2.5 years ago? Like, this, there's nothing to indicate to me that Middleton should come back and not have a really, really steep learning curve to get back to where he is. Middleton, he hasn't played basketball at a high level in months. Heck, he probably couldn't walk for months after having surgery on both of his ankles. I can't imagine how difficult that would be to walk at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, if Middleton comes back, I mean, like ultimately, sort of what I see with this team is, let's say Middleton comes back at the level he was at in the playoffs last year.
Yeah.
Man, that's a big deal. There's still a ton of questions about this team.
Oh, it doesn't solve their primary question, which is how do they stop someone from getting into the paint? Because like the bigger issue is they still like Lopez can still guard the rim, and Giannis is still a terrifying defender. The problem is there is no resistance on the perimeter. These guards are getting in and they're just blitzing past the defense.
There's no funneling.
There's no
no and you so like and that's really important as it pertains to Brook Lopez. Giannis is the type of defender who's so fast, he's so athletic, moves so well. Like he can get to places on the floor. If you're not funneling to Brook Lopez is largely obsolete.
Yes, because that guy's had like 6 back surgeries. Like he is a very. It's remarkable how good a defensive player he is at this stage of his career, given that fact. But he's not someone who's gonna, you have to play real serious drop defense with him because he's not hanging with your guard on the perimeter. Let's put it that way. And that's not being solved by Chris Middleton. Like they need to make major decisions, and I think that Lopez probably has to be traded. I think Portis has to be traded. Connaughton, I think, is probably untradeable, but if you can find something they can trade for him, they need to get younger, and they need to get younger fast, and need to get more athletic.
They need Grayson Allen back.
Yeah, they need Grayson Allen's another person on as part of this, and this. It's a shame because Giannis this year is as good as he's ever been. He is shooting 65% from the field right now. This is truly a remarkable season from him, and it looks like it's going to be completely wasted.
So, 2 questions. Like, I think even if Middleton comes back, for them to compete with the Clevelands, the New Yorks, I may even say the Indianas, although maybe not. But if Middleton comes back at playoff form, I still think that for them to compete with the Sixers at full strength, that's about as disappointing a start to a season as you could have asked for too. But the Sixers at full strength, the Knicks, Cleveland, I think for them to compete with them with Middleton back at full playoff strength, there's still going to have to be a trade.
Yes.
And I think that they've got to be banking on a team like Brooklyn being mad as hell in their front office about how scrappy this bunch actually is. They got Cam Thomas out there bombing away, and Ben Simmons, turning in these 8-8-8 games.
Currently averaging 6-6-6, by the way, which is
scary. But I think that Dennis Schroeder's playing really well there. So I think that they've got to be hoping that one of these teams wants to decrease their production, and they could pull like a Dorian Finney-Smith or a Cam Johnson off of one of those teams somehow. Because to me, that's what they really need. Somebody who can give them a strong defensive presence and shoot the ball.
I like that. I still think they need to get younger. I still think they need. I'd be looking in 23-year-old range, whatever I could get. Like that, I just don't know if they have the assets.
You think? So my question becomes this: like, do you think the 23-year-old helps you in the win now mode as much as a Dorian Finney-Smith or a Cam Johnson? Like two guys who are certainly still within their prime age and can do what you need. Because here's what I'm starting to think is happening. You're starting to see such a colossal failure from that team, from that front office, that you're already starting to hear rumors of Giannis contemplating forcing himself out of Milwaukee at the end of the year. And there could be nothing more devastating for that team than for them to have anchored themselves to an aging Dame Lillard and Giannis leave.
Yeah, I think that we're seeing system-wide failure right now. And like the body is shutting down. It's not just, one part that's hurt.
Oh, yeah. This is like where you're on the submarine and it's like the red lights are flashing and you're getting the meh, meh, meh. And you look over there and the water pumps are going out and the engine's not working. Like, this is horrible.
This is horrible. And I think that
you're doing worse than the Nets, who are trying to do bad.
Yes. I think the only way to resolve this is to bring in 6-7 new players. Honestly, like they need to do what the Lakers did 2 years ago at the trade deadline, where they're like, all right, everyone besides AD and LeBron out. We're bringing a whole new team, and we're promoting the Austin Reeveses of the world up into the rotation. So, I think, Dorian Finney-Smith makes sense. Like, I do think he would provide positive value. I think Cam Johnson would be the one I would be going after. Even more so.
Oh, he certainly has more upside.
I think that there are moves you can make on the periphery that make a lot of sense. Like Markelle Fultz, Dennis Smith Jr. are both currently available and unsigned. Lonnie Walker is another. I still don't understand why Lonnie Walker wasn't signed by them. Like that is beyond perplexing to me. Those are the moves that I would make first.
Those are things you can do today.
Yeah. And I think that you can have a really big impact with those, because the thing about Giannis is that he's the type of player that makes marginal players better than they are, as long as they have a vital skill they can contribute. And the reason why it's not happening is that you just have players that are, lack of a better term, washed. Like Condon looks pretty washed.
Oh, but even like, because you would want to say something like, well, it's only 2 weeks into the season. Well, I mean, this was the case last year. Like, we're not making a snap judgment about Connaughton. He looked this way last year.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm sure the shooting numbers are down lower than where they were last year, but they weren't great last year, and it's just a smaller sample size right now. I agree with you completely. I mean, I think that the players you could end up seeing perform a little bit better around the edges as the season progresses is like Bobby Portis. Those are players who I think have a little higher ceiling than what you're getting out of them right now. I think Gary Trent Jr. too. Like I think that with him, there has to be an expectation of him sort of like getting his feet underneath him in Milwaukee, feeling a little more comfortable there. And yeah, so I mean, but like none of that. I don't feel that way defensively about Gary Trent Jr. Like I don't think he needs to get his feet underneath him defensively. I think that like he, you know,
He's better than he is right now. Something's just like he just may not be. He may be one of those guys who just lost the foot speed. Like he's young. He's young that it shouldn't have happened yet. But sometimes it just happens. Sometimes players just lose the ability to be able to stay in front or like a defense.
Well, I mean, it just kind of comes down to though, like when you're talking about a contender, like you need to have someone. Like you've got to have somebody who is an all NBA level defender.
And he's not that.
That's my point. Like it's not like I'm not saying that like he you can't put him on an island with Donovan Mitchell and expect that to turn out any different than it did.
But then it's a junior on there. Heck, I'm gonna go sign myself for them. Yeah, but like that's the thing. There are players out there, and like there's the Mavs playbook to follow, which is Smith or someone like him a flawed player? Yes, he's a defensive player with limited offensive upside. But when you have surrounded by a All NBA like superstar generational player, you can get by with that in the right context. And that is a lot more valuable for your team in that context than a player who's like C plus on offense and C plus on defense. Like the high variance, like a defense, D offense, like that type of player is more valuable in the context of a contender with a generational creator than it would be on another team, for example.
Yeah, what you saw with the Mavs, I mean, I guess one question mark that still remains with them, but I mean, effectively what you saw with the Mavs, I think from last year was like we need one really good defender that we can put on the best player for the other team who's versatile to where that defender could be like that player that they're matching up against could be a forward, a guard, and they can switch. They can do a lot of things. And they're sort of the head of the snake of your defense. And then you need competent defenders who can help funnel to your shot blockers behind them, backing them up. And you don't have a situation like that in Milwaukee. I think a fair percentage of this has to be laid on Doc Rivers' shoulders as well. Like I just have a hard time with the idea, even with all of the things we mentioned, with Dame and Giannis playing the way that they're playing, I just find it hard to believe that you can't squeeze out more. In your first 6 games, you can't do better than 1-5. That's hard. That's hard to wrap your mind around.
There's no excuse for that. They're playing poorly, and he deserves. He said, "Hey, the problems last year were because I didn't get a training camp. Watch what I do with the training camp." We gave him a training camp, and he's even worse. I mean, buddy, and like. He is correct. He does still have excuses with the Middleton thing, which is real. Like they are like but the reality is this was a team that was already to, didn't have the depth to be a contender last year with an aging core who they just added Torian Prince and Gary Trent Jr. to, and we're like, all right, contender once again.
And Darvin Ham.
And Darvin the big 3.
Darvin Ham and Torian Prince are a package deal.
Yeah. And to be fair to Torian Prince, he's playing out of his fucking mind right now.
Yeah.
So like he's not the problem. Man is shooting 54.5% from 3.
Yeah.
But I'm ready to call this. This is a team. This could go really bad, really, really fast. Because this is a team that could spot like right now. What they're getting away with is defenses are still treating the rest of the team as that they're legit offensive threats. But you could see a situation where teams are just daring everyone else to shoot and doing what they're doing to Wemby, to Giannis, and Dame, and just sort of like focus only on them and say you have to beat 5 guys. We're going to let anyone else score, and there's no one else on this team that can score. There's no one else right now that can produce offense at an elite level.
I agree. I agree 100%. If
they start playing gimmicky defenses against the Bucks like that, and the Bucks don't have and let's say unless you see something like Lopez suddenly revert to 20 points a game, this is a team that could end up in a 35 win range
Yeah.
for this year.
Yeah, there's another team like that over in the Western Conference that's a little less disappointing because the expectations weren't so built up for them. Probably more disappointing for me because I live in Baton Rouge. My home team is the Pelicans. We go to a lot of games, and I didn't have huge expectations for them this year because I think that they had a train wreck of an offseason, which is kind of strange to say when you pick up DeJounte Murray, because I actually think that was a really good addition.
Center though, I just forgot.
Yeah. The problem was I think they thought they were going to be able to move off of BI for an all-star level center, somebody in the neighborhood of a Jared Allen. Cleveland was disinterested. They were unable to move Brandon Ingram. I think Brandon Ingram's a good player still. I just think there were a lot of teams who would normally be interested in him that are more interested in Cooper Flagg, and they're not looking to add any wins to the win total. And they felt like Brandon Ingram's value would push them into that category without actually changing the trajectory of their franchise. And they're probably right about that. But because the Pelicans screwed that up, and I'll mention also my football team is the Saints. So I will mention that, same ownership group, and there's some crossover in the front office as well. And it's hard to find a football team in the NFL more poorly managed than New Orleans Saints right now. So I think we might have some systemic management issues down in New Orleans. But I will say this. They have the injury bug to point to as an excuse. DeJounte Murray went down pretty quick. I think it was first or second game. He'll be out like 4 to 6 weeks with broken hand, had to have surgery on it. But then since then, you've already got Zion Williamson missing a game or two due to illness. He's now out. He's listed as questionable with a hamstring strain. The thing with Zion, this is probably a short-term thing, probably not going to be going very long. They probably are also looking at the roster right now and saying we're not going to compete for many wins, even with Zion out there right now. We'd rather just go ahead and rest him and let him get over whatever this minor injury is. But it does not pretend well for the remainder of the season in terms of Zion's availability. You got C.J. McCollum out with an abductor injury, and then you got Herb Jones out with a shoulder. You've got Trey Murphy still hadn't stepped on the floor with a hamstring injury. So you got a lot of injuries in New Orleans. You're basically less than what you were when you got ran off the floor by OKC in the first round of the playoffs last year. Brandon Ingram, the only advantage you have is I don't think Brandon Ingram is 100% in the playoffs, which is another reason I think he's getting a bad rap about where he is in terms of his career. I think he's much better than what you saw in the playoffs. Jordan Hawkins is, playing pretty well. He's got averaging about 17, 18 points a game. The problem I have in New Orleans is, for one, you have a player down there who should be a generational talent in Zion Williamson. If Zion Williamson is healthy and fully maximizing his potential, he should be a first or second team All-NBA player every year. He should be a first team All-NBA player. But the truth about Zion Williamson is while he has remarkable talent, we mentioned earlier, Draymond said after playing him, he's not strong, he's powerful. You wake up the next day, it's painful. And for somebody like him who's able to elevate, that first step so explosive, he's able to get into the paint and elevate so quickly. And then once he's up there, he has the ability to finish with power, or quite honestly, he may have the best touch around the rim of anybody in the NBA. Yeah. and an enormous amount of body control as well while he's up there. It's really impressive for somebody his size. But with all that said, like, you haven't seen much development in this game. You're starting to see a little bit more range in the 8 to 10 foot range, at least more shot attempts from that space. But you're not seeing much else. And I think you're seeing him pass a little bit, create for others a little bit more, which I think is of value. The big benefit that they stumbled into potentially, I think long term they have stumbled into a really good center in Yves Messi. I think that they really found something in the draft with him. This dude is long and incredibly athletic and plays with a really, really, really high motor, excellent rim protector, immediate lob threat. Kind of reminds me a little bit of Derek Lively, to be honest with you. I think he's more raw than Derek Lively, which is saying something if you remember Lively that first year. But in the right situation with the right point guard running the offense, and that could be DeJounte Murray, that can become a controlled chaos that's a positive value add, and even in year one. My big problem is starting to be with Willie Green, to be quite honest with you. And I think you've said this plenty of times to me. Any Pelicans fans' big problem should be with the damn training staff. I actually think there should be questions about whether there is a training staff in New Orleans. I mean, the number of injuries that they sustain every year is really remarkable.
Every year, like 5 or 6 guys go down for like months at a time.
Yeah, well, they seem to be like on trajectory this year for a 2023 Memphis Grizzlies type year. Like, I mean, you're bordering on, with the exception of Brandon Ingram, they don't have a single starter healthy from last year. Brandon Ingram's the only starter from last year who's fully healthy right now.
Trey Murphy, DeJounte Murray, TJ McCollum, Herb Jones, and Zion Williamson are all currently out.
Yes. So but when we focus on Willie Green, here's my issue. Especially in this situation. You've got a player like Jordan Hawkins who is averaging 18 points a game and shooting 37% from three. Yeah. 38% from three. But he would be shooting so much better from three if this was an offense designed to get him open looks from three. It's not. It's an offense, and Tim Legler talked about this on his podcast. I thought it was an astute observation. The ball just ends up in Jordan Hawkins' hands, and he's forced to kind of create a shot for himself. I think Jordan Hawkins is the type of player who, or it ends up in his hands, and he just happened to be standing there wide open and got a good look. But Jordan Hawkins, I think, is the type of player who I could see as he kind of comes into full bloom, being like a Buddy Hield type player.
Yeah.
Like he'll be able to hit some tough shots. I just think he's a little too young for you to a little too young in his NBA career for you to be relying on him to consistently create a good look from three for himself. And I think he would do well very much in the way that JJ Redick has done it for Dalton Connect. Like, make these looks a little easier.
Yep.
And you don't see that type of organization down in New Orleans, and it appears that the chaos, and I think that's the word. If you said, Ben, describe what's going on down in New Orleans, I would say chaos, and I would say it's chaos, disorganization, just whatever you want to call it, at every level.
Yep.
It's disorganization and chaos at the level of coaching and the way that the team plays on the floor. It's a lot of ISO basketball, Brandon Ingram creating a shot for himself, Zion Williamson creating a shot for himself. And those two are guys who you can rely on to consistently do that for themselves. Jordan Hawkins is not one of those guys. I'd say the same thing about Trey Murphy, to be quite honest with you, whenever he is out on the floor. you'd see his numbers go up if they were running more set plays that are designed to get him clean, open looks. So you got disorganization and chaos at that level. Then you look at the front office. I don't even know of a professional team that moved a key part of their team, a key part of their starting lineup, without having the replacement coming in like set in stone. This would be like an NFL team, moving their starting right tackle because they're just certain they're going to be able to replace him with something better. And then lo and behold, they can't find it. And they end up starting a rookie that, truth be told, when they drafted him, not one damn person in that building thought that he was going to be anything close to what he is now. And let's be clear, like, as good as he's looked and as optimistic as Pels fans should be about what Yves Missi has been thus far, they should not think that he is just ready to be a starting center in the NBA. He's too raw. He loses his place on the court.
He's been in the G League all year. He's playing his first league in the G League this year. That would be my, get him 40 minutes a night in the G League. That's where he really should be.
I think he falls somewhere in the middle, almost like a Derek Lively. Like I think you want to get him I think he's good enough, big enough, athletic enough, intense enough that you get him out there in NBA games as a backup center playing meaningful minutes, 18, 22 minutes a game, something like that. And you're easing him into this so that he can get a feel for the game, get a feel for the speed, get a feel for the intensity, learn how to play within an organized NBA offense, learn what works in the NBA, learn to develop some post moves and not rely entirely on his athleticism. But also be able to get you rebounds and keep the other team off the glass and protect the rim when your starting center's on the bench. The problem is they moved Jonas Valanciunas to Washington thinking they were going to be able to bring in a starting center, were unable to bring in a starting center, and in a very panicky move went and got Daniel Tice, who was a second or third string center for the Clippers last year, brought him into New Orleans and intended on him being the starting center. And he was so inadequate as a starting center that Yves Missi is starting to compete with him for those minutes. Yep. And I think that's a huge red flag about the way that front office is being run. I mean, Yves Missi is playing 21 minutes a game, and Daniel Tice is on 15 minutes a game right now. We're 2 goddamn weeks into the season, Ben. We're 2 goddamn weeks into the season, and the intended starting center has been replaced by an incredibly raw, hyper-athletic 7-foot rookie who is pure, unadulterated chaos on the basketball court in both good and bad ways.
Yep, that's basically.
And then the training staff, in terms of chaos, I mean, there's more activity going on in the training room with recovery and all that than there is on the basketball court.
I mean,
that's where the action in New Orleans is with the training staff.
Yeah. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see how it develops. And, I think that there's a lot of questions and no clear answers there, which is disappointing given that that's been the situation in New Orleans, I feel like, for the last 5 years.
Yeah.
So there could be optimism, but everything still has to fall into place, and we haven't got any closer. Definitely in the last 3 years. I mean, I feel like this.
No, you want to talk about a high variance team? Like we talked about the Memphis Grizzlies potentially being a top 3 or 4 team in the West this year, or being a play-in team, and it could be anything in between.
Yeah.
When you talk about the New Orleans Pelicans at full strength, I think it was last year, maybe it was the year before, there's a run where they're the number 1 team in the Western Conference.
Yeah.
And now we're talking about, are they a play-in team? Have they been surpassed by Houston?
Well, they clearly have right now. The question is, can they?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, 100%. All right. Well, we'll wrap it up with one team that I think has higher expectations than either Houston or New Orleans. And they should, because they have arguably the best player in the world, in Nikola Jokic. But there are clear red flags in Denver, clear calls for concerns for everybody that's a fan of Mile High basketball. So what do you think's going on there? I mean, other than the obvious.
I think there's, the thing that gets talked about a lot right now. Well, there are two things. One is Murray has clearly been struggling, shooting wise, separation wise, just not the same offensive player he was when they won the title. And then the big one is the struggles of Russell Westbrook and the bench. And I think that's that's been covered. Like their games where the whole bench combines for less than 10 points. And so those are the two ones that have gotten the most press. But the bigger one to me is that the starting five for the Denver Nuggets, which is pretty much, they moved out Braun for KCP, but honestly, Braun's played better than KCP has this year.
Yeah.
That's arguably a major upgrade on their end. It's pretty much the same one they had that won the title. But if you look at the unit as a whole, it's markedly worse, even though it's the same players and all of whom should still be in their prime than it was 2 years ago. As we talked about, Murray is just not the same offensive force. Like in this finals run, we were talking about a player who was on one of the all-time great sort of like spree scorer runs. Like he could rattle off 20 points in a quarter, with ease. And even though he wasn't necessarily the most consistent player quarter to quarter, he always felt in every game he was in that he could break out at any moment and be that force that helped the Nuggets separate from their opponents, and then Jokic would help carry it home. But Gordon, who's supposed to be Mr. Consistent from there, and who was the key piece and sort of like who added the physical toughness at 4 and gave a lob threat. He seems to have lost a step, both in terms of athleticism, but also in terms of offensive efficiency. That lob that he has with Jokic just doesn't seem to be the same effectiveness and the same weapon it was. Teams seem to have been able to sort of game plan for it better.
He doesn't seem to elevate the way he used to.
Doesn't seem to elevate at all, and it also just doesn't seems to be more limited in general. And teams just don't fear him taking him off the dribble or anything like that.
He did have a remarkable game the other night.
He did. No, like the thing about these players is they're not bad players. Murray is not a bad player now. Like he's not a net negative player. Porter Jr. He's not shooting anywhere near the level he was in their final in their title run. He's not rebounding, not playing defense at the same level, but he's not a net negative player. He's still a positive value player. Gordon, clearly a positive value player. But the defensive unit, like as a unit, their defense is bad now. Like they cannot stop teams. They were unable to get stops against the Timberwolves down the stretch. That was the reason they lost that game. They should have won that game. They were ahead, I believe, with like 2 minutes left. They were unable to get stops. And during their title winning run, they had a clinical level of efficiency. Then they needed a basket. They knew how to get to it. They always seemed to get that basket. Now they don't.
That's the big thing. Yeah. That's the big thing. I mean, you got Jamal Murray averaging, I think 16 points a game. But the problem is for him to get to 16 points a game, it requires a lot of empty possessions or a really inefficient offense because he's shooting 37% on 15 attempts per game. I mean, he's basically averaging a point per attempt. And that's not going to cut it when you're basically the whole theory of the case for Denver had always been we're going to lean on Jamal Murray in certain spots throughout the game, but there's going to be a lot of Jokic, Aaron Gordon, Michael Porter Jr., KCP playing off of each other. And we're going to keep this game close, get into the fourth quarter, And then a sprite Jamal Murray was going to be able to get to his spot, rise up, knock down his mid-range jump shot, get to the rim, finish a layup. And you can't get that out of Jamal Murray reliably anymore. And it's creating problems for them when it comes to closing out games.
It is, but the defense is the bigger problem. This team's averaging 117 points a game. Like that's enough points to win you an NBA title.
But it's important to remember that 117 points a game is in a very short span includes a lot of really, really high production Jokic games.
Yep.
And that's never been a recipe for Denver's success.
It is not. And it's also notable that they played Oklahoma City, the Clippers, Toronto, Brooklyn, Minnesota, and Utah. They lost the Oklahoma City game pretty famously. They lost the Minnesota game on Friday.
Fantastic game.
Yeah, fantastic game. And like they can take things away. That was just a well played game. But the issue is Denver's gone from a team whose clutch offense was world class to a team who's now struggles in the clutch. And it's all execution questions. Seemingly overnight, basically. Like that happened in the playoffs last year, and it seems to be continuing. And the bigger problem for them right now is that, Jokic is either the best player in the world, I believe, so you think, or he's number 2 on your list. But
well, I don't think Luka's played better than Jokic to start the season.
Yeah. But regardless of how you view it, this is basically he's having to either generate the offense for everyone else or score all the points himself right now. Like he is doing everything for them on offense.
100%.
And that is the big issue they're facing right now. The issues on the bench, I think that they can find a way to solve them. They can patch together either through signings or trades and get some people in there. They should be able to. But if they can't get the starting unit to defend better, if they can't, then they're in a world of hurt. And the other issue, even so, if you they're just not a good shooting team right now. I mean, Jokic is carrying their 3-point shooting stats on his shoulders himself right now, basically. But they need Murray and they need Porter Jr. to be shooting higher than 40% from 3 at a high volume, and neither one of those is getting anywhere close to that right now.
Well, and I also think when you look at the Minnesota game, it was a well played game. I enjoyed it. In fact, I may even say it was the best, most enjoyable game I've watched all season.
I would agree with that. Highly competitive.
Yeah, I mean, the Dallas-Minnesota game was fun, but Dallas was always in control of that game. I'm trying to think of another good one. There's been a couple good ones, but I think sort of the playoff history from last year with those two teams made this one a little bit more interesting, and it was fun to watch. The problems I see for Denver coming out of that game, though, is for them to get it as close as they did, they needed Aaron Gordon to shoot 71% from 3 on 7 attempts.
Yes.
That's not I feel comfortable saying that might be his best 3-point shooting night of the season.
Yeah.
Not saying he won't shoot, have decent nights from 3. 71% on 7 attempts is well outside of his range. And I agree with you about defense. I do think Braun has been a good defender.
Yes.
But I don't think Jokic is a bad defender, but he's not an elite defender and he doesn't provide elite rim protection. So the difference between Denver and say Dallas, or the theory of the case even in Milwaukee, or at least when Milwaukee was good, in LA, you have an elite rim protector there that if you can funnel players to them, they'll finish the job. You don't have that in Denver. They need defenders who can contest shots and, really, really make things for their opponent difficult. And outside of Braun, I haven't really seen anybody doing that.
That's because no one else is. This rest of this team has just become jump shooters.
Yeah.
Like it's that's the big thing. And in their title run, Murray could generate his own offense, and he could generate offense for others at a high clip in the playoffs. He was he scored over 20 points a game and was getting like 7 assists a game. I believe he averaged 10 assists a game in the finals. That is no longer a thing he is happening. So what that means, because their bench is giving him absolutely nothing, is that Jokic is generating every single thing. He is becoming, he is the sun in of their solar system, and there's no one else who is able to pitch in at all on the playmaking front. And Jokic is, one of the greatest passers of all time, but there's only so much. Like, it becomes relatively easy for a defense to do that if there's no other threats to play make, and there's only one playmaker. There's just so much that defenses can set up for, and teams are able.
Well, what the defenses are doing is they're saying like
sure. Yeah.
There's nothing about Jokic that's changed. Jokic is still Jokic. Jokic can score 40. He can do 20 and 15. He can do 20, 15, and 15. I mean, he can do whatever he wants. Like, that's not the issue. They know that hasn't changed. What they know is let him score 40. He can't beat us. What we're going to do is not let him get 15 assists, because if he's kicking it out there to Aaron Gordon and we're letting Aaron Gordon knock down shots, or Michael Porter Jr. or whoever, that's how they're going to beat us. Like, these guys aren't good enough anymore to knock down those shots if we can test them. That's basically what defenses are strategizing. They're not helping. OKC did a lot. OKC helped on Jokic a lot, but that's the opening night before the opponents have any film on what these guys are going to look like together. And since then, they've helped on Jokic less, and they've forced everybody else to make contested shots.
Yep. And so, yeah, they play on Wednesday with OKC. I'm really, really looking forward to that game. I think that's going to be a big indicator to see if this team has the upside potential to be a real contender.
I agree with you completely. Yeah. If they show up and they're flat in that game, if they look anything like they did against OKC in the opening game, there's real problems in Denver, because they should be as highly motivated as they can to show up and beat the ever-living hell out of OKC after that first game.
100%. So, yeah, question marks. It's not quite 5-alarm fire there like it is in Milwaukee.
No.
But, we're at the 3-alarm, quickly getting to 4-alarm, put it that way. The last one, they still have a chance to course correct, but we're getting close. Yeah.
I'm happy with what I've seen out of Braun. I don't know at this point, any team who goes out and excitedly acquires Russell Westbrook, I just kind of, I don't know what they've seen. Like, Russell Westbrook is this year what he has been for quite a few years.
Nothing. He's shooting a little worse, but he'll have a couple. He's had a couple games where he shot okay.
But he shoots so bad, even in the past few years, that a little worse. It's like what we were talking about earlier about comparing Wemby and Chet's 3-point percentages for the season. I don't want either damn one of them. The thing with Russell Westbrook, I see I don't have a hard time believing Russell Westbrook's a great locker room guy. I think his teammates love him. I don't think you will ever at any point in his career hear anyone say anything to the effect of, we're just not getting the effort we need out of him. Russell Westbrook this is an interesting way of thinking of him. What I was saying earlier about Yves Missi and last year about about Derek Lively, about how they're just like explosive chaos that's good and bad. Like you just try to rein it in as much as you can and direct it towards some positive outcome. Russell Westbrook's the only goddamn first ballot Hall of Famer I can think of late in his career that's still that way.
Oh, yeah.
I can't think of another player in any sport that is like a first ballot Hall of Fame level player who in the twilight of his years in the league is still just run down the court, split defenders, attack the rim, lose the ball halfway, somehow hit it off his knee. It flies off the backboard, shoots all the way back out to the 3-point line. They end up in a fast break going the other way, and then he tracks it down and blocks the shot from behind. That happened in the OKC game to start the season. And it was just the full spectrum of what Russell Westbrook is, all in a 9-second span. And I don't see what the expectation is of him solving any of the problems that they have in Denver. Maybe a little defense, but Russell Westbrook's energy on defense plays against him just as much as it helps him sometimes.
Oh, I think that's 100%. I mean, he can't be a player you rely on at this point. He just can't. And they're not only relying on him, he's the first man off the bench. You know, like that. That's like they need to upgrade their bench. I'm not gonna doom and gloom over that because the bench, like they're a team that just needs a couple. Like they need innings eaters. They don't need like game changers off the bench. Like that. That's one of their.
Well, they've always needed the same thing off the bench, and that they've I think screwed up a little bit in the past couple of years in two regards. Like they've really never recovered from the absence of Bruce Brown. And then the non-Jokic minutes cannot be just bleeding. The team can't bleed out in those minutes. And Dario Saric is not thus far revealed himself to be in any way an adequate.
Oh, that looks bad. I'll have to eat crow on that one because I thought that was going to be a good addition, but it's just not worked. It's just not worked at all, and it's so we'll have to see.
All right, man. All right, well, we'll wrap it up there. This was another rather lengthy episode of the King of the Court podcast in which we managed to turn quick takes into long takes, deep dives into half-hour soliloquies
there we
about
go.
About some of our some of the more interesting teams and players in the NBA right now. We're excited about what we've seen thus far, and we look forward to coming back and talking about the third week of play in the NBA next week. So don't forget to like and subscribe. Follow us wherever you get your podcast.
All right, y'all. Don't forget to vote.